that you view this live cast using the Google Chrome extension instead of on your browser. The extension only takes a couple of minutes to download and will provide you the best video and quality experience for our event today. The other thing we'd like to recommend is to use the grid view setting. This is something you can find in the top right corner of your screen. All you have to do is select the grid view and you'll have the best experience for today. The other thing is an event like this, I'm sure, is going to have a lot of questions on your behalf. We encourage you to submit those questions using the Q&A function on the right-hand panel. And if you're active on social media, we'd really appreciate you sending your tweets, your posts with the hashtag BI Livecast. And please remember to tag us as well in all of your posts. The other thing, a quick reminder as well, it's not too late to invite a colleague to today's livecast. Feel free to forward them the link that you used to log in today, and they'll be able to join in for all of our conversations today. As well as if you're able to not join us for the entire thing, please know that this entire presentation will be available on demand on YouTube as soon as the event is done, and you'll be able to view that at your leisure. One final thing, I really wanted to thank Cisco WebEx for being the official technology partner of Brand Innovators Virtual Summits and for facilitating a really good virtual experience for all of us. So getting all that out of the way, we hope that you're looking forward to today's livecast. We'll hear from marketing leaders at Cadent, Empower, the TVB, Post-Consumer Brands, Sanofi Consumer Health, H&R Block, and many more. In between each of the sessions, we'll play a brief 30-second thought leadership video from Cadent's educational series, which is titled Coming to Terms with At Terms, which is something I think we could all use a refresher on. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our first speaker of the day. Jim Trikerico is the Chief Revenue Officer and President of Sales at Cadent. He was previously the CRO of Screen Vision and the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Viacom for 12 years. Where he was responsible for managing the Nickelodeon TV sales force for the entire country. One other quick fact about Jim that I recently learned, that Jim and his wife love to move. They get a new house, they live in it for about a year, and then they move to a brand new home. And so I think he's plenty of experience on the moving side. And so a fun little fact, Jim, welcome to the virtual stage. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're excited to have you share your thoughts.
Tesh, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. And yes, people question we keep moving because I'm Italian, whether the FBI is chasing me. It has nothing to do with that. It's just, we just enjoy the building and the whole journey in terms of moving around. So I don't know why, but many people attribute it to my Italian heritage. We'll figure that out if it has anything to do with it. But thank you and welcome everybody. So I want to start with this. Good morning, Vietnam. Okay, so I would say that only about 20% of the people who are on this call today know what I was referring to when I opened with that line from a very famous movie from 1987 with Robin Williams, called Good Morning Vietnam, right? Every morning he would open up. 1987. Many of you weren't born in 1987, right? But that was the top film that year. Just to give you a couple things to think about. The Cosby Show was the #1 show on TV that year. It did a 27.8 rating. Yeah. 27.8. Cheers was the #2 show. It did a 23.4 message rating. Do you know what Bravo was in 1987? Bravo was a network, a couple of years old, and it had hashtag for ratings and was a network about arts and film. I am Jim Trikerico. I'm the president and CRO of Cadent TV. And I wanted to say, for those who don't know Cadent, we are a TV technology company who is hosting today's event. Now, just even those words, that we are a TV technology company hosting today's event, I've been at Cadence for 7 years almost now. And I can tell you that 7 years ago when I came here, that I never would have thought that I'd be speaking those words, that we are a TV technology company. But that's how much and how quick the world has changed. You know, just think of this. 5 years ago, Bravo had lost ratings of about 36% on 18 to 49 to today, and about 25% on 25 to 54. So I don't have to go back to 1987 to show you and to tell you how much things are changing and how rapidly they're changing. But look at Cadence. When we came here 7 years ago, we were primarily just a straight linear cable and broadcast company. Now we are a company that also has indexed linear, right? We also bought a company called 4Info back in January, which has put us squarely in the OTT arena, right? A DSP with an amazing device graph. Who would have thought 7 years ago at Cadence we would be talking about a device graph, a DSP, and pipes into today's OTT inventory? I wouldn't have. And last but not least is who would have thought that we would be one of the addressable leaders in today's marketplace, not only from a sales side, media side, but also with the help of Jamie Power, our chief data officer, operating officer for ATV. We have built a platform for addressable. Unthinkable 7 years ago that we would have a platform in 2020, but here we are today. And so we offer everything from cable to broadcast to ATV, and nobody would have thought that 5 years ago. So I'm here today to talk to you a lot about change, right? There's not a lot of good stuff about being 60 years old, right? I'm kind of weird, even those numbers coming out of my mouth. But the one thing that being a 60-year-old does is give you a little bit of perspective, because we can remember back to 1987 when broadcast television ruled the world. Cable TV was just in its infancy, right? And now cable TV has grown up to be where they are today. But, you know, the key thing is it's changing again, because that's what, you know, content and TV and print and everything does. It evolves. Nothing stays the same, right? 1987 and now is 33 years. It's a long time. But I only have to take you back 10 years to when I was at Nickelodeon and at the Kids' Choice Awards, and how much has changed. Because those two little kids you see watching TV at the Kids' Choice Awards 10 years ago in 2010, the Kids' Choice Awards used to do a 10 rating. The VMAs used to do a gigantic rating. Bravo was, like I said earlier, was having ratings that are 36 to 40% higher than they are today. Things are changing, and now it's being accelerated. And we all talked about the fact that COVID has changed a lot of things in our lives. But one of the things it has done is accelerate the change in behavior for linear TV. I'm here to announce TV is not dead. TV is far from dead. But what does TV mean today, right? TV doesn't mean the regular way you watch TV on a big screen. You know, maybe I'm 60, I still watch it that way. But TV means just, you know, absorbing content. And if you look at all the names of the companies on the bottom of this slide, this is what TV is now, because of the fact that the Kids' Choice Awards and the VMAs now have been watched differently. You know, Viacom created Pluto, Disney Plus, right? The Peacock Network, Netflix, Amazon, Roku. All of these things are ways that you can absorb content. And today we call them different things. We call them CTV, OTT, right? And you watch them on different devices, whether you pick up your phone, you watch it on your laptop, you watch it on your iPad, wherever you watch it. It's all TV. And at some point, it's all going to converge together into just absorbing content. It'll be measured similarly. The experience will be similar, and everything will just be watching content. You may call it TV, but it's going to change. And listen, here's a fact. 25 million people over the last couple of years have cut the cord on cable TV. 25 million. CNBC had an article out this week that basically said in the next 5 years, another 25 million people will cut the cord, right? And somewhere the households that will be watching traditional linear cable TV will be somewhere around 50 million households. That's crazy to think that, but that's the change, right? That's the change that's happening in cable and broadcast TV these days, right? And that change will lend itself to the fact that how do I reach viewers on these different devices, right? We're trying to figure that out now. So TV by no means is dead. It's just going to have a new definition, and all of this will become TV. And all I could say is just think of where we're going to be in 10 years from today. You won't even recognize this marketplace today, because it's changing that fast. We've gone from buying shows to buying audiences, right? And that will continue to happen over the next couple of years. And again, accelerated as time goes on. We can go to the next slide. So what will the TV marketplace look like? Here's the thing. When I was at Nickelodeon in 2010 I finished my run there in 2012, right? Those kids that were 10, 12 years old then are now 22 years old. It's unbelievable how fast it goes, including my children. So what is it going to look like? It's going to be data-driven, right? Audiences. The buying, which is centralized, is going to be now aggregated. The screen, which is that big thing, which I still love, right? Bigger the better, 60, 75, 80 inch, you make it bigger. As you get older, you can't see as well, right? Now it's a multi-screen approach. I can't tell you that I watched more than a couple of shows before COVID hit, but now I could go with the best of you and talk about Ozark to Succession, right? To all the shows that are now across Netflix and Apple and Amazon Plus and all those. Never 9 months ago would I watch that. But now I also watch it when I'm out. I can watch it on my screen. I don't always have to watch it, including sports, on that big screen anymore. And we're going from people, process, and tech to automation. I mean, automation is speeding the whole thing up. And the biggest other change is TV used to have that old saying, right? You know that 50% of the people you're reaching are wrong, but you just don't know which 50%. But now you do. Now business outcomes have become a really important part of every media plan. So it's changing. Again, it's not dying, it's changing. And accountability and audiences are what it's changing to. And where do you reach that viewer? How do we measure that viewer? Right? And what are the business outcomes? Because no longer is it okay just to run media and hope, because hope is not a strategy, that you're going to be successful. Really what you need is some kind of attribution on the back end to show you web hits, store traffic, right? Whatever it might be, right? But business outcomes is where this is all heading. And you can see the changes that are being made by the networks to enter into this new world. A lot of people feel slower than we should, but those changes are coming. And you see, from the creation of all these OTT products to the business outcomes that they're offering, all of this is going to be part and a staple of how we move forward over the next 2, 3, 5 years. Next slide. So how do we get there? Well, probably if I had the exact answer, I would probably be really rich. But, listen, three things are going to be really important. Flexibility, addressability, and measurability. Flexibility is giving advertisers spending flexibility that enables them to follow their audiences, right? You can't just do it one way anymore, right? It's a combination of using all of the different opportunities to reach your audience, whether it's, again, traditional cable, traditional broadcast, OTT, addressable. They all complement each other. There's no more silos where you use one or the other. They all need to work together, intertwined. And that's how you put together a smart media plan. Addressability is such an interesting topic, and we could talk about that in itself for hours. But the advent of a device graph and viewer graphs is changing everything. We know what you're watching. We know the shows you like. We know the networks you like. We know what you buy for prescription drugs. We know when your lease is up on your car. All of that stuff is important that you formulate your media plan and send the correct messages to each household based on that data. And we talked again about measurability, but it's all formats, all screens, all audience definitions, right? How do you measure the success or failure of a campaign, right? What learnings do you get from that campaign? Because not all measurability is going to come out positive. Some of it's going to be negative, but you can learn just as much from failure as you can from success. And it helps, again, create the next campaign. So today, I'm excited about all the topics are going to range on the changing world that we all live in. The first one, bridging the gap, how cross-channel TV campaigns help marketers, right? I'm going to host with Td Schaffner. Later, we're going to talk to my old friend, Steve Lanzano, and TD Touchdown Tommy Dixon from Post Brands. Later on in the day, build your own foundation to success with CTV and OTT, right? And that's Jamie Power, our Chief Data Officer and COO of our ATV. The future of identity in television, right? Tim Jenkins. I mentioned before that we bought 4Info, a DSP, back in January with an amazing device graph. He will also be talking to Kurt, who's our Chief Technology Officer at Tegna, and maximizing reach in an era of fragmentation, right? And Jess Santoro, who's my SVP of Advanced TV and Video, we'll be talking to Andrew Martinson from H&R Block, who I have visited many times in Kansas while trying to visit my daughter. So it's my favorite account. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Td Schaffner to our WebEx. Let me tell you a little bit about Kathy. So first of all, we love Kathy to death. She's one of the nicest people in the business. But Kathy is the Chief Investment Officer of Empower. Empower, as most of you know, is based in Cincinnati, Ohio, with offices in Chicago and other places. Probably one of the hottest networks in all of Agencyville. Not only, from a holding company or an independent, but just agency in general, on fire. And Kathy is the proud mother of 3 children, but I wanted to highlight one in particular because her daughter is in the Marines. And it gives me chills when, she told me that yesterday. The other part I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Kathy is that she went to the Ohio State University. I don't know if you want to dot the I, Kathy, but of course, I'm a Badger, so we get our asses kicked at least once a year by Ohio State, usually in the Big Ten championship. But, Kathy is amazing. We have an amazing partnership with Kathy, and I want to introduce her to the entire audience. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Glad to be here today. And boy, your opening comment sure hit home, because I remember being able to buy 4 programs on a Thursday evening and being able to reach my entire audience. And you fast forward to where we are today, and it's crazy how much things have changed in the past 30 years and how much they're going to change just in the next 3 years.
That's correct. Yeah, that's the acceleration that I talked about. Like, people can't even fathom a 27 rating on the Cosby Show, right? Who would
Yeah.
think, like, when I was at when I was at Nickelodeon for 12 plus years, the Kids' Choice Awards used to do a 12 rating, and that's
Oh,
with the
yeah.
decimal point on that side. And now we know that those ratings are nowhere near that. They're more around the one, but the kids are still watching the Kids' Choice Awards. It's still a great event, but they watch it differently. They watch it on their phone. They watch it on their laptop. So no longer is that going to be just TV anymore. All of this is going to be TV.
Yeah, and you touched on a couple of key things, and I know we'll get into them a little bit today, but it really has now just shifted and come all about the content. You no longer can buy one night of TV or 2 nights of TV, or even when you think about cable. I remember back in the days when you could go by the Real World and reach everyone you wanted from 18 to 49. I mean, on MTV, you just can't do that anymore. But the content is still being produced for these audiences, and the content is rich. And so it's all about now finding the audience through that content versus through the channel.
That's exactly right. So let's start. You guys have had tremendous success at Empower over the last few years, always, but specifically in the last few years, you guys have been on fire. Tell me a little bit about what it's like to be an independent in today's world versus those holding companies, and how you've become so successful.
Yeah, so we have had a good couple of years recently, and this year it has been no different. The pandemic has certainly flipped our entire industry on its head, and it's been a tough road to navigate through that. But we have been able to use our position in the market to navigate with our clients and our new clients that have come on board, our new partners this year. And a lot of that's attributed to what we call being the unholding company. Yeah, we're an independent, but we refer to ourselves as the unholding company. And I think this year, more so than ever, that's been critical to allow us to help continue to drive change and success for our clients. And to understand how that works, I just want to take a moment and step back and just explain what the unholding company means. It really means that Empower as an independent is rooted in a client first mentality, not a shareholder first mentality. And that's incredibly important because, as you mentioned in your opening comments, the industry, the world is changing so quickly. And so being an independent, being client first allows us to be a lot more agile and nimble. And in a case of like we had, back in March when things started to shut down and the world went crazy, we were able to change and adapt with and for our clients to the market based on their business needs and not ours. So it's been incredibly important as an independent and being the unholding company this year, so that we can help navigate with our current and new partners.
So in addition to that, with the changing way, the relationship between clients and agencies, how are you navigating through those changes? Again, we used to see agencies would be hooked to a client for 30 years, right? You don't see that, or it's very rare now that a client and agency will be together. How do you navigate? There's so many changes going on the client side, and agency reviews are happening, daily, weekly, now more than ever.
Yeah, well, I will say I remember the days back when you would, a client would be in an agency for 25, 30 years. But some of that great work that we've been doing has allowed us to still buck that trend. The average tenure of a client or a partner, like we call them at Empower, is 8 to 10 years. So we still have a pretty long-standing history. And I think a lot of that gets back to, again, that nimble and agile approach to being able to change and be thought leaders in the industry. Particularly this year, more so than ever, we've had to be able to adapt to what's happening in the industry. And our approach, whether it be a content first approach or our data driven approach, has allowed us to be able to put forth some incredible work for clients that's helped them to deliver on their goals.
I talked a little bit about in my opening about fragmentation, right? And again, when you're at Nickelodeon, you see it first, right? Because the way those kids, right, and young teens view content I saw it first. We saw the train coming because you could see they were already changing the way content is absorbed, and it's very short time from when they go to be kids to young adults to your consumers. So how do you deal with that fragmentation?
Well, I mean, it sounds pretty simplistic when I say it's with focus. We work really hard to focus 3 key areas to overcome the fragmentation that's happening out there. The first one is just really around building the right audience, and you touched on that. We spend an incredible amount of time working with our partners to develop really robust and actionable first-party data to marry that with third-party data so that we can really identify the best customers, because that's really at the heart of what we need to do. And you talked about that a lot, whether it be moving from a one-to-many to a one-to-few, but setting up that core right audience and getting that actionable first-party data is the first thing that we help our partners focus on. I think the second one, which is really important, if you think about all the changes happen, is shifting the mindset that you got to focus on marketing to your audience through the content that they're consuming and not through the channel or through the device that they're using. Helping our brand partners understand to identify the audience and go find and market to them through that content is the second piece of focus. And then last is just measurement. You mentioned it as one of your 3 things: flexibility, addressability, and measurability. We like to say at Empower that we report to the report, because we believe that what we do and the business that we drive and is all based on that measurement of everything that we do. So we have a full team of in-house data scientists and analysts and researchers that deploy on every plan that we do to make sure that we are finding that right audience. And then the other thing too, I would say, is from a fragmentation standpoint, is it's still about casting a wide enough net to be able to find that audience where they are. So, it's not about reach frequency anymore, as it is just about finding the audience in the right moment within their customer journey.
So this is the $1 million question, right? Because you have your crystal ball, pull it out. So, so we know, like before COVID, right? Everybody was projecting 5 years out before you saw a major change and shift from linear TV to OTT. Now COVID is, like I said, I'm running out of stuff to watch on CTV right now. I've watched every damn, after Ozark and Succession and Billions, and you go down the list. Where do you see all this going in 3 years? I'm not even going to say 3 to 5 years, because 5 years is so far away and we won't even recognize it. But in the next 3 years, how do you work your way through it?
Well, from an audience perspective, I think we're going to have, as an industry, to really figure out what that new normal is based on what the pandemic has done. It's going to leave a lasting impact on media consumption. Just think of ourselves as we're sitting here having this panel or this fireside chat here online in Zoom. I mean, this is going to become a new normal, even 3 years from now, as things change and get back in the future. As a society, we're going to demand change as consumers and how we view the content. Think of all of us that are working from home right now. Over half of us, when surveyed, will say that this is what we want for our new norm and our new future. So think about, as you work from home, and as you said, all the things that you've watched, think about all of the media you have access to, all of the digital platforms that you're using on a daily basis, and your time to consume them has expanded. So I think we're going to have to, in 3 years, figure out how we advance the industry to mirror that, timing, that consumption increase. And to your point, more and more content is going to have to be put out there. From an agency standpoint, I think our industry is going to have to make significant progress in holistic campaign management. That's going to be key. You touched on in the beginning, we used to be able to do, siloed type planning and buying. And I think this year has probably catapulted us into rapid change. So 3 years from now, we will be doing a better job of transacting on common currencies, using common measurement across all these screen devices. And I think technology is actually going to get a big kick to catch up, where we can, follow a consumer across a single view or a single lens, and then in the reverse, give that single experience to the consumer across screen. So, as tough as this year has been, I think it's been kind of the kick in the seat that is needed to get us moving forward to where we should have been probably 3 years ago, where we'll be 3 years from now.
Yeah, you say everybody wants to stay home. I'm not sure if you measured or polled the spouses of the people who are staying home, whether they would feel the same way. But I know from us, from a sales group, it certainly changed the way as a person who's been in the marketplace for 40 years, has changed my perspective. But I think relationships are still really important, and some of that needs, human contact.
I would agree. I mean, we are, people-driven business. The culture that we have in Empower is all built around collaboration, in-person collaboration, meeting and spending time with our clients, even meeting with folks like yourself. So I think that we're going to have to shake out and balance a new normal, because we can't, continue to always be 100% all virtual. But I think, we'll get to a new normal, but that new normal will have an impact on how we consume media.
Agree. So let's talk a little bit about your Emerge platform and the
Sure.
customer journey. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Emerge is our platform that allows us to deploy channels targeting audiences across the full funnel. We call it Emerge. It allows us to rethink how we've done business in the past, how we've gone to market in the past, based on the way the consumers are viewing right now. So, for example, I'll use TV as an example. When you think about the full funnel approach in planning, and you think about driving awareness and consideration at the top of the funnel, all the way down to getting folks that are in market for your product, or driving the conversions at the bottom of the funnel. Years ago, it was simple, right? You could take a channel to reach your target audience at each level of that funnel, and you knew what it was going to be doing. What our Emerge platform allows us to do is rethink those channels and use them throughout the full funnel. So TV, for example, certainly video used at the top of the funnel to drive awareness. But you can bring, and we bring, digital like capabilities in targeting and measurement to that TV environment, so that we can go beyond that one to many at the top of the funnel and add in advanced TV, connected TV, addressable TV, so that we can create opportunities both in the shopping phases of a consumer journey and in the conversion phase of a consumer journey. But it's really a designed platform that allows us to, do everything from identifying the audiences, the channels, the right message, which is also critically important, and then again, the measurement on the back end, so you can wash, rinse, and repeat, and keep talking to those consumers.
And the same thing, I just want to ask a little bit about, there's a dirty word out in the marketplace called procurement. Tell me a little bit of how you navigate through procurement, even in your pitches, right? You're pitching new clients, but also having a client, right, in your portfolio. Like, how much do they get involved, and how much, does that influence your decision making?
Well, procurement has been increasingly more involved in our pitches and work that we're doing with current brands. I think that you have to have, I don't want to say a fine line, but you want to be careful that procurement is not influencing your decisions to reach that audience, to drive business results. But in the same respect, there are some newer areas that procurement has come into beyond cost efficiencies that we do see bleeding over into what we're doing. For example, you touched on it, the flexibility to be able to move money, terms of deals, whether it be payment terms or outability clauses in the media that we're buying. So there's a little bit of blurred lines there, but procurement's been a lot more involved. But I think you still got to keep a little bit of separation of church and state, right? Because the media and the consumer cannot be driven by the complete terms of what procurement needs.
Okay, great. So let's talk about cross-channel campaigns.
Sure.
Right? And so can you talk about the role of data as you put together those campaigns?
Well, if you haven't figured out by now, the data first approach that we use is incredibly important to all the work that we do. I mean, the entire industry has always used data, right? It's just now we use it in a more robust and complete way. So for us, the role of data in how we serve our brands is everything soup to nuts. It's in everything we touch. Data informs the audience identification that we're doing in the beginning of the plan and the targeting, all the way to every investment decision that we make. Data determines the optimizations that we make. And then everything we're doing on the back end with detail attribution and understanding the data telling us how our media is performing all the way across channels. It just continues to be the foundation of everything we do. So it's incredibly important to how we service our brands.
How do you manage through the walled gardens part of data, right?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So, that, and there's a lot of talk around that. If it's truly a walled garden, we try to manage within the walled garden and then in combination with the bigger picture. So let's take frequency, for example. If we're managing frequency within a walled garden, we would then calibrate our measurement across all of the different areas and then within that walled garden. At the end of the day, frequency in this case is really just a means to the end. What we need to do is get to the end point of incremental lift, how we're driving our clients' business in terms of awareness, traffic, and sales results. So we don't let it deter us. We just work within it and then calibrate it on measurements for everything that we're doing outside those walled gardens. But it is challenging.
Yes, for us too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you deal a little bit with transparency, especially on the OTT CTV side about, there's some things that need to be worked out, right? The viewer experience, the frequency caps, some of those things. Like, how are you working through some of those things to make sure that, that the evolution of CTV is what you need to be successful?
Working alongside great partners like yourself to make sure that we set the rules of engagement up first, up front, making sure that the data is putting us in the right place to, help us with brand safety, to help us with making sure we're in the right environment for our clients. It's a difficult area to navigate, but transparency is incredibly important to us. We are the transparent agency, and just making sure that we are really looking at everything that's coming into that equation to make sure that we have the brands well aware of environment and content that they're going into and protect their brand safety as much as we can.
Right. So let's go back a little bit to the client relationship.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about the salesperson to agency relationship. How, when you're pitching a new account in the COVID world on Zoom, how has those pitches changed since most of it is being done on video versus how you did it in the past?
The biggest thing that's changed in those pitches is, we have won a lot of new clients this year. We've brought on several new partners that we've only met through Zoom. So that's a very unique nuance to add to pitching and winning a new piece of business. From a technology standpoint, we've made the transition to work from home pretty easy. I mean, our operations were always set up and designed to be nimble and flexible when we were working in the office, full access to leaders, integration, collaboration. We've always been organized around our clients. So from a technology standpoint, switching to working from home and then pitching business was just a matter of adding on a layer of technology. All of that same operational spine that we had before the pandemic was still there. From winning new clients and pitching them, I think there has been one benefit that has happened from the Zoom, and that is it's taken some of those ancillary and side considerations for selecting an agency out of the mix. Now the work and the people and the thought leadership is first and foremost when you're talking to a prospective partner. And we're on a level playing field because now it doesn't matter if you are cross country or what region of the country you're located in or that the client's located in. And, the work becomes the primary focus, and you can deliver on that work. You can build that trust through that work. And, that's one thing I think Zoom's done. It's done the exact same thing for us in terms of talent. You no longer have to have talent necessarily in the same geographical region. So I think if anything good's come out of, the pandemic and working remotely in Zoom, I think it's probably been that.
How has it changed your perspective on creative? Not only from the type of creative, but the flexibility to change creative, as the times change, right? We see the numbers are going back up in the fall. Like how much is the creative process changed now, because you have to be pretty nimble to change messaging at any time in case, things start to head backwards?
Are you talking about like how are we handling, being able to adapt to the creative based on the media choices that we're making?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty important because, with a large shift of dollars now going to more digital platforms, we're doing a lot more in social and search areas. Being able to work with clients to understand what that messaging needs to be, not only just to target the right audience, but in the right environment for what's going on in the world. We are a creative media agency. We do have a full suite of creative folks in-house that help us lead our clients through navigating the sensitivity of message, aligning the right message with the media. It has created a challenge, and a lot of that leadership coming from our media teams, or not only our media teams, but also from our creative teams, has allowed us to help prepare our clients for what's ahead, particularly as we start optimizing and changing and shifting and moving their dollars at a more rapid pace.
Yeah. And what about the technical abilities of the agency? How have they changed in this new world?
The technical abilities as far as working from home?
Yes. And communicating with your clients and among your team and all that.
Yeah. I think it's gotten, the technical aspect has been fine. I mean, like most, agencies and companies and brands out there, we obviously have, the technical team to be able to support what we need from working from home. But I think it's actually made some of our brand relationships better. When you're in the office, and I'm not knocking it because, I'm a people person. I love to be in the office and the collaboration, but there's distractions, right? There's the side hallway conversations or the drive-bys. And, when you're on Zoom all day, and it's so easy just to like click in or ping to one of your clients and have a conversation. And our technology there allows us to do that and join people into the conversation at a moment's notice. I actually find that while we've always talked to our clients as much as, possible, and we spend a lot of time in person with them pre-pandemic, I think we spend just as much time with them now. They have more time to spend with us, right? They're not commuting on either end anymore. The workday has blurred. There's no fine lines of the workday when you're working from home. So, I think there's been improvement with it.
So what is, in your mind, the key to success for the next couple of years going forward as an agency? What are you going to have to focus on to make sure you maintain the same level of success?
I think we're going to have to continue, obviously, to focus on some of the roots of our foundation of what's making us successful now, which is, the data-driven approach to the media planning and buying we do and the content. But I think the number one thing is going to be adaptability. And by adaptability, I mean, it's not just what's going to change now to 3 years from now. It's what's going to change today to tomorrow or next week or the next month. And I think the more adaptive an agency is, the more adaptive you can be in terms of everything you do, where you work, when you work, how you go to market, how you use data to find audiences, how you seek out that content, how you change as the world changes around us. The adaptability of an agency, I think, is going to be key for success.
So tell me a little, one more question, and then we're going to go to
Okay.
the chat room and see what the questions are. I'll try to read them first because sometimes
Sure.
they're a little bizarre. But so tell me a little bit how you decide between addressability, index linear, and OTT. Like how do you decide of those three what is most important to your client?
Well, I can tell you that in a lot of cases, it's not one or the other. It's a combination, casting a wide net. Um, it also has to do with the how robust first-party data that our client may have. It also can even go as far as the terms of being able to access that content or that inventory to be able to fit the broader marketing needs of the client. But I think the biggest thing is just how do we use all working in concert together with everything else that's happening. So again, it's not really a one or the other. It's just where is the data taking you, and not having any preconceived notions of where to go. I will say that from the measurement standpoint, one thing that does help us determine is what can we measure on the back end to understand what's driving results. So making a move toward more performance-based outcome guarantees. Can we buy media that can help us understand and do attribution on the back end so that we can have more performance-based outcome guarantees in our media decisions?
Excellent. Well, I'm going to jump to the questions now. And I think the
Okay.
first question is probably somebody from CBS, but I'm not sure. So are you viewing the Super Bowl and ad buys for the Super Bowl differently this year? And how about sports in general?
Yes. So yes, yes, and yes. So sports in general is going to be an interesting challenge because um, the ratings that are coming along with the sports properties now are in flux. The ratings on any of the sports programming, Super Bowl or other, are challenging to predict. We see up and down declining audiences. Some cases, depending on if it's the last game of the World Series, potentially it can hold the audience. I think the biggest thing that we're going to help our clients understand is you can't focus. It's like what you said in the beginning, Jim. Like we used to be able to buy one night of TV. Well, you can no longer buy one sport program, one sport event, the Super Bowl, and that's it, and you're done for the year. Or I'm only going to buy around NCAA basketball. It has to become a piece of the puzzle and not the whole puzzle because it's just too unpredictable at this time.
Right. So another question, do you allocate separate budgets for OTT now, separate from linear, search, social? And how you decide on the main partners for OTT, except for Cadent, of course?
Yeah, well, the answer to that's always Caden, right? No,
Yeah, just Cadent. Like they used to say, the
it's
answer
just
is
Caden.
the answer to all these questions is Cadent.
It's just Caden. Yeah. So we used to have I think it used to probably, if you look back now, it probably felt like more of a siloed approach. But the question of how do we determine the budgets, it really is just on where can we find the audience. And we have a centralized planning group, an intelligence planning group that helps us decide what those budgets are. It's not siloed buying groups within Empower that are vying for a piece of the budget. It's really what does it take within each of those channels to reach that audience. And so we let that data drive where those budgets go, versus, we don't have any preconceived notion that 5% goes through OTT or 50% is going to go here. It's really where does the data shake out for where that budget needs to go. And then of course, then it goes to Cadent. No, I'm just kidding.
Bing, 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 bing. I feel like,
how do we choose those partners? Yeah, I mean, our buying teams, they're amazing. They've been doing this for a very, very long time. They approach each and every deal based on well, price obviously is a big thing, and then reaching the content. But now terms of the deal become very, very important. So we leave that up to our buyers to each time they go into the market to determine who those partners are.
great. A couple more. You ready?
Okay. Yep.
A couple more, and then we're done.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on the future of local broadcast and how relevant their program will be in terms of generated ratings in 5 years versus today? 5, long time, 3 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think local broadcast probably has a way to go. They've got a lot of change ahead of them. I think we're going to continue to see it evolving more to a focus of only local content that's only available at the local level. News content, local community content. How we plan local media now has changed dramatically. For some of our clients who are regional buyers, regional marketers, how we go to market and think about accessing that inventory at the local level is challenging because it's not when I say they need to change, it's not as readily available or as easy to go into those markets in the local level and deploy that data to go find those audiences. And that's where I think local broadcast has a lot of growing up to do. We need to be able to take that digital-like targeting that we're able to do a little bit more seamlessly on the national level and apply it into each individual market on the local level.
So they've talked for years. I mean, and
Yeah.
I'm old, but they've talked for years about the upfront changing, right? And yet we go into the upfront every year and it's all about the rate of change, right? All it is about the rate of change and leverage, right? Leverage and value. I leverage my Super Bowl. And one of the questions really is all about, has this COVID experience changed media forever? Will we finally see a change to the traditional upfront that we know it, or is it just muscle memory and we can't help ourselves?
We will see the change. I do believe that. Prior to this year, there's only been 2 events that have really started to rock the boat on changing that traditional muscle memory of how the upfronts happen, but it happened this year. I know Empower embrace the market in a little bit different way. We don't even call it the upfront within our 4 walls. We call it the flex front. And the reason we call that the flex front is because it is all about going and making those buys on behalf of our clients in a way that is flexible for them to be able to move their money as their business needs move. So, going in and placing a 4-quarter deal up front and locking your dollars in, that's a thing of the past. Now, it doesn't mean that the upfront, I think, is dead and it's going to go away. But what it does mean is the upfront's going to take on a whole new path and a whole new meaning. And who knows, maybe the industry will stop calling it the upfront to help with that muscle memory. That's what we did. Like I said, internally, we call it the flex front. But it has changed, and I don't think it's going to change back to the way it was.
Your lips to God's ears. The other thing that as Ritesh comes back in, but the one thing that I wanted to ask you just before we go is we also had the change of clients saying, I want that show versus I need that audience. Because that shift has been way slower than people have ever thought, right? The shift to audience buying. People still like their shows. They still like to know their ad is going to run at 8:01 in this particular show. When are we going to get away from that and truly embrace audience buying?
Yeah. So that is muscle memory that's going to take a while to break. And I think when we're going to truly get away from that is when the back end attribution and success from all that measurement proves out that that's not the way they should be thinking of, I want that show, at 8:01. But in the meantime, to get from point A to point B, there's a lot of, shareholder buying, right? Let's go buy the right audience to drive your business and we'll get you the one show at 8:01 for you so that you can feel like, you're doing what you're doing. But that is a very good point, because that's muscle memory that's going to be hard to break. But only proven results is gonna finally break that.
Well, if there was any doubt why Empower has become so successful, spending this last 30 minutes with you should put that doubt to rest, because your entire team is so incredibly impressive to work with, including that handsome devil, Jim Bryce, who runs the agency, and tell him he doesn't have to go in every day. But really, it's an honor to work with you guys. It truly is. It's an amazing partnership. You guys are so smart and so good at what you do. And I just wanted to say congratulations and continued success. And we just love the relationship, and we just look forward to bigger and better things through the rest of this year and into 2021. So thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your partnership as well. We appreciate all that you guys are doing for the industry and moving the industry along. So, and I appreciate you having us here today. And just remember, flexibility is a big hot word, but it is adaptability, and it's being able to adapt, because you've made a good point. We can't talk about 5 years from now. I don't even know if we can talk about 3 years from now. We need to be talking about 3 months from now. So, but thank you for having us here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kathy and Jim. That was great. And Jim, thank you as well for sharing your thoughts, as part of the keynote in terms of what trends are we anticipating moving forward. I'll tell you very quick thing about attribution in my own personal life. Basically, a lot of my clothing has started to disappear from my closet, and I was attributing that to my wife, but now I know that I should really be attributing it to Marie Kondo, because that's really who's responsible for doing all of this. That's the attribution change in my own household. So having said that, I would love to have you do watch a brief video that I mentioned earlier before we invite the next set of speakers to the stage. Excellent. Thank you so much. When they said it's a brief video, they meant it was a brief video. That was great. Thank you so much. So next up on deck, another excellent topic that I'd like to introduce. We have Steve Lanzano, the president and CEO of the TVB, and Td Touchdown Dixon, who you normally would find on a Sunday afternoon in the red zone, but he's going to be joining us today as the Chief Growth Officer of Post Consumer Brands. And they'll be joined by the moderator, Rick Beispel, who is the SVP of National Sales and Strategy at Cadent. And the topic is how broadcast TV helps marketers during the pandemic and beyond. So welcome to all of you. And TD, thank you for coming out of the red zone for us to join us today for this conversation. And I turn it over to you, Rick, and I'll catch up with you guys in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritesh, and I think we're off to a great start after our Future of TV keynote and first session with Jim and Kathy. I was, really taken by some of Kathy's comments, report to the report, the flex front, adaptability, and I'm sure Steve Lanzano is going to respond to some of her thoughts on local broadcast. So welcome, everybody. And I'm really pleased to be joined by my two special guests who are with me today. They are both friends and partners. Steve Lanzano is the president and CEO of the TVB. He is the industry leader and advocate for local broadcasters across America who play such a big role in all of our lives. Formerly, he's held leadership positions as the CEO at MEC and COO at Advas. He's a Seton Hall grad and without a doubt, a definitive Jersey guy through and through. And also with us, and very pleased, is Tom Td Dixon, former CMO of Welch's, former CMO of Jack Link's, and newly appointed Chief Growth Officer of Post Foods, the third largest cereal company in the US with iconic brands such as Grape Nuts, Fruity Pebbles, and my favorite, Honey Bunch of Oats. So great to see both of you guys. Looking forward to a really lively conversation. How you guys doing?
Very good on this wet autumn day in Central Jersey.
Yeah, it is not beautiful out. And what is going on there, TD, in Minneapolis? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Unfortunately, it's cold. Mother Nature has told us that it's time to turn the heat off. So we're just trying to stay warm here.
Got it. So are you guys ready to jump in?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So these are serious times. So TD, I think the question that is on many people's minds, first off, is what was it like to be on the Celebrity Apprentice?
Well, first of all, Arnold is a big man.
No
And he'll be
doubt.
back. That was a great experience. I guess the one thing is I know they canceled the show after my episode, so I don't know if it was me or not, but it was a fun time.
I'm sure it was. And I think Steve and I would both agree that your Q scores are still pretty good.
All right, great.
So now getting to a more serious note, it's been an unusual year to say the least. So Steve, the election has been very meaningful to TVB members. Clearly the money has flowed. We've all seen the ads locally and on a national level. How has this cycle been particularly unusual? And can you speak to that?
Sure. Well, obviously, it's been a very different year. But I'll make an analogy to what's happened this year to what's happening in terms of political. Now, obviously, in the political environment, where until just recently, it was the candidates were not able to do rallies, get out and see people. The only megaphone they had was local broadcast TV. But I make a very big analogy between what's happened in political and what's happening in terms of advertising overall. And if you look at it, what do political advertisers look for? They look for trust in the media that they're going to advertise in. They look for flexibility, right? As the polls move, they move their monies. And you're seeing it now as each of the candidates on the presidential side are moving their money to different states depending on the polls. Each of the candidates, or the RNC and the DNC, are moving money based upon what's happening in Senate and congressional races. So you need flexibility. And to me, that's the marketing word of the year for all advertisers, right? You need geographic flexibility. You need timing flexibility. You need creative flexibility. Then you need scale, right? As TD will tell you, if you need to reach a lot of people to move product, okay? That is exactly the game plan that marketers have and why they use local broadcast TV in political, and exactly the game plan that national advertisers had this year in terms of getting their messages out, because didn't know what messages were going to work, didn't know what states were open, what's going to close, what's moving, what's not moving. So having flexibility, having trust, having scale in premium environments has really been the game plan for all marketers this year, and not just political marketers. And that's why you're seeing that in 2018 was the record for political spending, which was a midterm. And usually presidential elections every other year spend a lot more than midterms. Well, the midterm in 2018 was about 3.2 billion was spent on local broadcast TV. This year we expect it, right now, we're projecting and tracking at $4.2 billion. And it just goes to show you the efficacy of the meeting, right? This is one area, and TD can talk to this better than I can, right? You can't be number 2 market share in a campaign, right? You lose. There is no such thing as being, we're number 2, we're okay. No, you lose. And it just goes to show you how political marketers continue to not only look at what we can do, but also how effective we are in terms of winning campaigns and persuading those persuadable voters, especially towards the end of a campaign.
Well, the growth stats are really impressive, and you make a very interesting analogy between the local needs and the national needs also. But it really speaks to, in a way, the power of television on a macro level, which was a great way to kick off this session. And then I'll go to you now, TD, and say, there's really been no playbook for the past few months, right? The family landscape which you serve has been so altered and upended by stay-at-home orders, virtual shopping, pressures amongst parents with children. How did you alter your approach to better serve your customers? What did you learn, and how did you change those marketing media tactics to be more in line kind of with the mood of the nation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, there was 2 kind of fundamental consumer behavior shifts that we saw. One was what we call retrench. And if you think about all the things that you just talked about, the fear of the pandemic, the uncertainty, it created a dynamic that caused people to kind of retrench or cocoon back home, right? Just for kind of that safety mechanism, if you will, to protect themselves and their family. The second one we call reset, and this really gets to kind of the uncertainty of the future. And so that kind of reset the shopping behaviors and really even the way people decided to spend their money, and kind of reset, what their expenditures were going to be, not knowing kind of what the future held. So for us, looking at those two kind of fundamental consumer trends, what we wanted to adjust to is, all right, well, as marketers and as, manufacturers, how do we deliver against those fundamental changes? So within retrench, because this notion of safety and protection was such an important part of kind of the new consumer dynamic, comfort brands, things that made people feel safe and comfortable, was something that was important. So we tried to leverage the brands like Honey Bunches of Oats, like Grape Nuts, really tried and true brands, right? When you're stressed out, the tried and true, the things that are familiar are very comforting. And so we leverage those brands as really our front runners with those consumers. And we've seen tremendous growth from that. To deal with the reset, this is where value has taken on a whole nother level of prominence. And we're fortunate that we sort of own the value space within the cereal category with our mom brand. And so again, we really focused on that and reinforcing that value, particularly when you think about, even when you look at like packaging formats. Consumers didn't necessarily want to go to the store multiple times throughout the week. So in our brand Mom, we have very large packages that, if you want, could actually last you a month. So you can make one purchase, but then you feel not only have you been able to save money, but you also feel more safe because you can stay home knowing that you can feed your family. So really, those were kind of the ways that we adjust to address the retrenched consumer behavior and the reset consumer behavior.
And did
TD,
that
can you
adapt
send
to
me a bunch of those Fruity Pebbles then? One of those big packets of
I
Fruity
got
Pebbles?
you, man. I'll give you the gigantic size.
No, TD, make him pay for it. That's wrong. You go to Costco, you buy it.
We'll do a little barter here. How about that?
So with those kind of the adaptability that you just mentioned there, did you have kind of hyper or localized initiatives to take advantage of particular markets? So then I want to get Steve's read on, is local relevance even more important today?
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And again, kind of back to this notion of trust, right? So not only are consumers looking for brands that they can trust, they're looking to, their news outlets and vehicles where they get their information to where they can trust. So we definitely were much more hyper targeted within local markets. There's a lot of regionality that we already have with our brand, so we needed to do that anyway. But I think even more so in this, really hyper politicized, hyper polarized time, really being able to focus in those local markets and being able to attach yourself to, whether it's kind of the local entities, with sponsorships and things like that, as well as like your local news broadcasts, because consumers just have a much higher trust factor with those areas.
Nice. Music to Steve's ears. So Steve, on the mood, you mentioned the aggressive political spend. Are you beginning to see categories that have been challenged during COVID, like auto, QSR, retail, beginning to make strides back into the marketplace?
Yeah, the core business, which is everything else other than political, we consider to be the core. And obviously, auto is one of our biggest categories. It's still anywhere for a station, anywhere between 20 and 25% of their revenue. And it's starting to come back now. At the beginning of the pandemic, the SAR, which is the average sales over a year, the SAR for the month of April was 8 million. This month, it's been almost 15 million. So people are starting to buy cars. The issue in the car industry now is inventory and getting inventory on the lots because of the manufacturing issues, getting the parts, et cetera, since there was a shutdown in terms of manufacturing. But now they're starting to get more cars on the lot. We're actually seeing growth in an area that we hadn't seen growth before in auto. And that's actually two areas. Area number one is used cars. Used cars have gone through the roof. The wholesale price on used cars is up 15%. The price of a used car on retail is up a little bit higher than that. And you're seeing AutoNation amongst a lot of other people creating dealerships that are just used car specific. So we started to see money from used cars that we hadn't seen before. Secondly, automotive insurance, and that gets back to a category that was always a national category in terms of national cable TV. But when the ratings for the local news, because as all politics is local, lately all news is local. I want to know what's happening in my township. I want to know what's happening in the city. I want to know what's happening with the pandemic. I want to know, like the weather today, what's happening with the weather. What does that mean? Are there going to be blackouts? And of course, the trust factor for local news. We all grew up with our anchor. We know who it is. We know who our meteorologist is, right? We know who our local sportscaster is. So when you combine all that together, and then the ratings went through the roof, they're still up. Ratings for local news for adults 18 to 34, young adults, is up almost 60%. And even against our traditional target of adults 25 to 54, is up between 25 and 30% still. And those numbers were double that at the beginning of the pandemic. And they go up and down depending upon what's going on. And of course, we expect those numbers to really hit another high next week with the election, et cetera. So combining all that together is why our business has really done quite well. And now we're starting to see the retail dollars as we get into the holiday period, the QSR dollars, and the dollars from home improvement. Home improvement's been a huge category for us. People are hunkered down at home. I know my wife was, I don't want that couch anymore. So that couch went away and we got a new couch, right? We all redid our landscaping.
Very
right?
smart.
We need to fix the pool now. We're not going anywhere. So the home improvement category was a category that went through the roof. The legal category went through the roof, obviously, with what's going on, unfortunately, in some things that have gone on in legal. So, and we've seen money from the education category, which we haven't seen before, as kids decide, you know what, I'm not going back to school. I'm going to just do online from home and maybe do it from a local community college. So it's been a very different year in terms of categories.
I wanted to touch on a topic that I think is very relevant to both of you, and that's brand purpose. So at the recent ANA that was last week, there was a lot of discussion, heightened importance of brand purpose. And one of the speakers went so far as to say, it is no longer the 4 Ps about product, price, place, and promotion, but the 4 Ps are now defined by people, purpose, passion, and positivity. And TD, you are a very positive individual, and your post-consumer mantra is to make better happen. So how did you embody make better happen at a time when people's lives were, difficult, not easy, right? And they continue to be somewhat challenged. So how do you introduce that greater utility to their life beyond just the product?
Yeah. No, one of the things and one of the reasons that I actually even joined the organization was because of that purpose. Is something that I'm very proud of and moved by. And that it's really grounded or rooted in the philosophy that, we are trying to make our consumers' lives better and we're trying to make our employees' lives better. I think during this time, the best illustration I can give of how it manifested itself is using those two constituencies. So when you think about it from our consumers, obviously, cereal is a staple of households, and it's becoming even more of a staple again as people come home. But there were a lot of people out there who couldn't necessarily afford. And so, given all the stay-at-home orders, given all the business closures, all the unemployment, to your point, we donated millions of dollars to food banks and hunger relief organizations, your Second Harvests, your Feed Americas, to enable people to have a bowl of cereal every morning that wanted one. If you think about all of the children who weren't in school, a lot of which, that was the meal, one of the main meals that they were able to get in going to school. We felt like it was, our obligation to be able to supplement that. And so really proud of what we did. We weren't the only ones. I don't want to necessarily say we were alone in that. A lot of our competitors did the same thing, but that was something that I was really proud of. Maybe even more proud is what we did for our employees, and particularly our frontline workers and our manufacturing personnel. Again, this category exploded. Like a lot of categories, this category exploded because, relatively speaking, cereal is a pretty cheap eat. So it was a staple for people to kind of go back to cereal to help feed their family because, again, it can, on a cost per bowl basis, it's a pretty inexpensive meal. And so we knew we had to keep our plants, full on in order to be able to deliver against that demand. And so one of the things that our CEO decided to do, given all of the safety precautions and all the PPE and all those sort of things, we obviously did that. But we also put in significant bonuses for people who were willing to work above and beyond in order to keep up with that demand. In addition to that, he extended their PTO opportunities so they didn't have to necessarily take their normal vacations, and they, after working several long hours, they could take a couple of days off. So, both for consumers and for our employees, I felt like we really have lived that purpose in a big way.
That's a lot of good work. And Steve, how would you define purpose through the lens of local broadcasters? And is it a changing landscape for local broadcasters from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll give you an example of what we did early on. And obviously, as local restaurants and local eateries, unfortunately, couldn't have any on-site dining, whether it was outside or inside. We worked very closely on a market-by-market basis with our stations and created what we call Takeout Tuesday, where people were taking out on the weekend, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and just started picking up into Thursday. But early on in the week, there was very little in terms of any revenue coming in for these restaurants. So we started a PSA campaign on Takeout Tuesday with free advertising to really get people to, hey, why don't you come, why don't you take out on Tuesday, help your local establishments. We did the same thing with small businesses in the area, whether it was, especially as we came out of the pandemic or it got a little bit better and doctors and dentists were starting to see people. We worked very closely with them in terms of PSAs, and you got to go back now. You got to get, checked up. It's time. But to make sure people understood with the PSAs, the protocols they had in place to keep you as safe as possible. So again, as the times go on, we do that, and now we're in a campaign that we've done for 17 years, which is our brand buzz campaign we do with the Ad Council, where during the holiday period, it's about don't drink and drive, or drugs and drive, and it's a campaign that we do with the National Highway Transportation Association, where we have data. They have data that shows that campaign, which 1,000 stations actually participate in, saves people's lives. So again, as the times go on, our job is to look at the local businesses and how we can help them in terms of growing their business.
So it does seem that both your organizations are embodying kind of the 4A's new definition. I wanted to turn to sports for a moment. TD and I share a passion for UT football, which has been very disappointing over the past 2 years.
Yeah,
he is also a Dallas Cowboys fan, which has not been great either. But if you take a look at the sports landscape on the national level, for the most part, the ratings have been down. And the NFL may be coming back, and certainly the election has an impact on taking people's attention off of sports and other factors too. But I've always been impressed when you see particular ratings on the local level, and I'm going to give you a few ratings in sports on the local level, because how does an advertiser, Steve, tap into that local passion? So the LA World Series, Game 6, did a 27.5 rating in LA and a 37 during the peak. If you look at some football games, the Bears win over the Panthers did a 29 local rating. Steelers over the Browns a week ago, 36.6. The local ratings are insane, and they exceeded the ratings that Jim quoted for Cheers 30 years ago. So it really is, on some level, a tale of two rating stories, but the local passion, Steve, is unbelievable in select markets, which I think is an opportunity for marketers.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, especially not only professional football, but college football. When you look at the ratings for University of Alabama and Alabama, in Mobile, Alabama, you look at the ratings for the University of Florida in Jackson, those ratings go through the roof. They might not do as well as in Minnesota, but certainly for they're the local team. That's where the passion is. I mean, even the Giants, I'm a Giant fan, so hey, here we go. But even the Giant games in New York are doing big ratings, right? They might not do a big rating outside of New York, but do a big rating. In fact, the Giant Cowboy game in both Dallas and New York did huge ratings. So you can tap into that passion. You talked about earlier about the ANA and the 4As talking about passion. Tapping into that passion is gold for a marketer. And being able to, on a local level, and then do a local promotion with a station, really can up your partnership with that sport.
Good stuff. So the whole day is about future of TV. And the future of TV certainly is impacted by the marketplace that we all operate in, the ecosystem. And the ecosystem now, is certainly marked by fragmentation and cord cutting, new technology. So one of my partners and clients described it as the atomization of the audience. So with that atomization of the audience, what are the strategies that you're employing? So TD, how are you viewing CTV and OTT within your media mixes these days as a relatively new medium?
Yeah, I think it's funny because someone once said, is TV going away? And I think we can all agree TV's not going away. It just had a lot of babies. And so I think to your point, you just have to, as marketers, we have to determine, okay, which are the right babies for us to focus on. And that's really what we've done. I think the dynamic of, to your point, the itemization of it, on one hand, it exacerbates the amount of choice that you have, but on the other hand, enables you to be hyper targeted. And that's really what we've done with things like, CTV, is really been more targeted, also both with the audience, but also with the message. It's given us an opportunity to, optimize the message on the fly. And we spend a lot of time trying to understand not just who the who is, but what is it that they want to hear. And we've been able to do that with some of these new mediums. And we use that often as a way to, do A/B testing to understand which is going to, ultimately drive conversion the most. So I look at it as more of an opportunity than as a challenge, because, even though we can all remember way back when it was, 3 networks and you just kind of went out there and did a shotgun approach. Now it's more of a sniper approach, but you can not only be more targeted, you can also be more relevant with that specific group.
But you also mentioned that, when we were doing our prep sessions, this was a quote, people have fallen back in love with TV, and that appointment viewing with TV is starting to happen again.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for post?
Yeah, I mean, it's, it might be different than it was in the past in the sense of, the Cheers or Friends or whatever. But folks, because you're retrenched, back to this notion of retrench, we see it with the binge watching. We see it, as Steve alluded to, with the going and wanting to watch the local news because you want to get the information about what's going on with the pandemic or what's going on in the political environment. Sports, again, I think when live sports came back on TV, that was such a relief for people and a release for people. And so that's what we're seeing, is that those eyeballs are now coming back, and leveraging that, albeit on a local level, is really the way for marketers to reemerge again. The biggest thing for us, and if I think about us as the third player, one of the things that we have to be still conscious of is maintaining that share of voice. Because people aren't necessarily going into the stores as much as they used to, you have to almost, get the decision in their mind before they ever actually go to make that transaction. And so that's where TV has really, been an efficient medium for us to be able to do that.
And Steve, the local broadcasters have a lot of initiatives in the CTV arena. Sinclair has Stir, Nexstar has the Liquid platform. I believe it's Tegna and Premium. It
Correct.
seems like the hyper-local CTV is getting traction and significantly more after April of this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's an insatiable appetite by advertisers for over-the-top inventory. There's just not a lot there's not a lot out there right now, and it goes away. But what it does is for the group broadcaster or the own station group is you can sell the scale of TV or what we provide in terms of sports or primetime TV now with all of the programming coming back out of production and going on air. And you can sell the local news. And in many markets, the local news, if you included it with the primetime ratings, would be a top 5 show in the market, including primetime. So being able to provide that scale and then be able to provide that hyper targeting in terms of over the top is a gold mine. And now as we get into the new next gen broadcast product, ATSC 3.0, which can do targeting on a device level and provide you the data back from a device level, we'll even get more targeted in terms of not only your connected TV, but your mobile device.
We're going to do 2 fast questions, and we'll go to some Q&A from the audience because my texts are being lit up by you two gentlemen with Q&A. And mostly good, I will say. Okay? So we are talking about the future of TV. Encapsulate the importance of data to post and to local broadcasters moving forward, and then more of a personal question, then we'll go to the questions.
You want me to start?
Sure, Steve. How are the local broadcasters beginning to incorporate data? And you can answer Kathy's questions a little bit.
Okay. The bottom line is that for all of us, data is the most important thing, right? Data informs. Data helps you make decisions. Data doesn't make the decisions for you. They provide insights, and then you use those insights and your experience to make a decision on it. It's extraordinarily important to advertisers. They need to know, I ran a spot. Did I receive the audience? And did it have an effect on my business? So the measurement of that is important on a daily, and it's become more and more important as we move forward. So data is everything in terms of advertisers and media buyers and media sellers.
Excellent. TD?
Couldn't agree more with what Steve said. You know, from a marketer's point of view, right? Dollars haven't grown as exponentially as the choices of where to spend those dollars. So to Steve's point, that's where data comes in, right? It gives us the ability to make better choices. You know, again, as a challenger company as we are, we can't outspend. We will never be able to outspend our competitors in Mills and Kellogg's. So therefore, it makes data even more important for us, right? What we can do is we can outflank them, we can outthink them, and that's where using, you know, marketing mix and using other data tools really helps us to be more poignant with the choices that we make.
Now we do have to, I'm going to close my questions to you guys, and we'll go to some questions to the audience. We do have some young marketers who are watching today. If each of you had some career advice for them as they rise through their careers, what would you say was some of the core values that have worked for you, or some of the success attributes that you'd like them to aspire to?
Work hard, ask questions, read everything you can, be as smart as you can. If you're on the agency side, know your client's business better than they know their business, and understand through their eyes what their what their goals are, and make sure that that you're moving in the right direction. But if I was a young person, it would be learn as much as possible and ask as many questions as possible.
Yeah, I'll build upon that. You know, some advice that I was given early on is chase the skills, not the titles, right? Titles come and go, but skills stay forever. And that's exactly kind of what Steve gets to, right? Learning agility is the most important weapon that you will ever have in any career that you do. And so, you know, always I still learn, you know, as an old man, I'm still learning. I'm sure Steve does as well.
All the time.
Td,
Td, you were the rookie. You were the rookie amongst the three of us. So
it's all relative, baby. It's all relative.
you got to retrench on that comment. All right, so here's some questions. Great dialogue, guys. Thank you so much. Questions for the audience. Steve, what does the broadcast marketplace likely look like in 2021 on the local level?
Obviously, a lot's going to depend upon things that we don't know about. When do we get back to some level of normalcy? When is there going to be a vaccine or a therapeutic or treatment? So I think right now the marketplace is going to look a little bit like what it is right now going into first quarter. It's so hard to provide any type of vision, any type of long-term vision. I mean, even TVB, we're working on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis in terms of what our goals are to help our stations grow their business. But, you know, obviously political will go away. A lot of that's going to be picked up by core. And we expect automotive to really start to pick up as they get the inventory on their lots.
Okay, so you see a pretty relatively positive year ahead.
I think it's going to be. I think the core is going to be up, but overall we'll be down only because of the political dollars.
The political.
That's every other year anyway. So that's how we. You know, that's how our business has been over the last 50 years.
So this is an interesting one, TD, and it may be under the NDA arena. But,
Okay.
can you give us any insight into what your next hot new product is in the cereal category?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can actually give two because we've actually just released both of them. You know, they haven't hit the shelf yet. So one is we just did a long-term partnership with Dunkin', and so we're introducing the first coffee-infused cereal. Literally is coffee inside of it. You get a little caffeine boost, and it's incredible. So I recommend all of you guys go out and get it. So that's what's happening on the what I call the traditional cereal side. The other thing that we're doing, one of the big things that we are kind of changing about our approach is we're no longer thinking of ourselves as a cereal company. We're actually thinking of ourselves as a breakfast solutions company. Again, to be able to meet the evolving needs of consumers. And so we've just introduced a version of cereal snacks with our Pebbles brand and with our Honeycomb brand, which is truly snackable cereal. You know, people already snack on cereal, right? They pick up the box and reach in. And so we're like, well, why force people to do that with the box of cereal when you could actually provide it as a snack? And so that's the other thing that we've just introduced. And I got some other things up my sleeve, but to your point, I don't want to divulge those. I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you afterwards.
Keep them wanting a little more, So maybe that's just a great way to wrap things up. I will tell both of you, great fun dialogue. I hope our audience learned a little something in the process that I know I did. I'm pleased to call both of you friends and partners, and we thank you on behalf of everyone at Kadant for your support, your partnership, and your friendship.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rick. Really appreciate it.
Ritesh, back to you.
Absolutely. Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much. It's always difficult to be the middle topic in an event like this because there's a ton of excitement for the start. There's a ton of excitement for the wrap. And then in the middle, it's like, man, I got to keep that energy open and going. But Rick and Steve and TD, fantastic jobs. Thank you so much. I did learn a lot. Anytime I hear someone say TV is dying, I'm going to say, no, it's just having babies. and actually I'm going to attribute it to you, TD. I'm going to say that wasn't mine. That was from,
tribute away.
I will absolutely steal that away. I love that because it makes a ton of sense. So thank you again to all of you. We'll continue the conversation. And before we get into the next topic, I would love to share another short video clip before we come back to the next session. Excellent. Thank you so much. I love how these clips are short and to the point, and give us something that we haven't heard yet. So thank you so much for that. Next up, super excited to welcome to the stage Dana Borgava, who's the head of experience planning and media at Sanofi Consumer Health, and her moderator, Jamie Power, who's the chief data officer and chief operating officer of ATV at Caden, for a fireside chat on building your own foundation to success with CTV and OTT. So welcome to both Dana and Jamie. And I'm glad to see a little bit of a healthcare presence today, because I did spend some time at AstraZeneca a long time ago. And so really appreciate hearing from Dana and Jamie. Over to you.
All right, thank you. I mean, it's a TV company when we have commercials during our summit. So, I mean, we're definitely nailing that piece of it. So thank you all. Thanks again, Dana, for joining us. You look amazing as always. And I kind of knew you were going to bring it. So I tossed on some lipstick, kind of up my Zoom game. So me and Dana have actually worked together in different capacities and known each other for over 10 years. So 6 different companies, always kind of figured out a way to work together. And the conversation was always kind of about data and how do you make media more accountable? How do you plan smarter? And we kind of bonded, Dana, I don't know if you remember, but I think we bonded back when we were at Group M. And basically we were total geeks, and we geeked out on a tool that Group M had built called Expert. And what Expert basically did was it optimized a brand schedule, delivering the most deduplicated reach efficiently. So if you think about it, like in the world that we're living in now with fragmentation and viewers going across all these different screens, it's the same problem that Expert was solving. And it's, how do you understand how the impressions are working together? Is this impression delivering reach? Is it delivering frequency? What KPIs is it going to deliver against? So those are the type of questions that people like Dana and media agencies are trying to solve. So in this session, we're going to go through all of that and more. But before we jump in, Dana, I have a question, and you might kill me for it. But do you have any unique quarantine talents? Like, are you tie-dyeing? Are you making banana bread? Anything that you're doing that you used to not do a lot of?
Well, I would say in the beginning of this, I was definitely cooking a lot more, and then realized that being a short order cook was not of a lot of value. So right now I've pivoted to, in terms of skills, is just keeping my children alive. Like I have some pretty simple goals this year, which is if my 6th grader can pass 6th grade and my kindergartner can pass kindergarten, just show up enough that you pass and get credit for the year. I'll consider that my biggest accomplishment this year.
Yeah, it's a big win. I was like super nice to my husband in the beginning. I used to like make his berries be arranged properly. Now I'm just like, here's your oatmeal. Leave me alone. Okay, so on the last panel, the statement was made, TV is not dead, it's just making babies, which I thought was a really interesting statement. But I know you have strong opinions on that statement in general, so I thought we would come out of the gate with that. And can you share with us kind of your thinking around that statement?
Sure. I mean, Jamie, I don't know when TV became a bad word in our business. Like, when did people start feeling embarrassed that they planned TV and that TV was part of their media mixes? I mean, so let's just throw the word TV away for a minute and say, okay, if I said to you, Jamie, hey, guess what? I have this opportunity for you to run video. It's unskippable. You can run 15 and 30 seconds. You can tell your brand story. You can get a ginormous scale. I promise it'll help your other precision tactics, and is going to drive consumption on your products. Would you still think it was a bad idea? Would you be embarrassed to invest in that? I don't think many people would be embarrassed to invest in that. So, I mean, I don't know what happened where we started to think of TV as the bad guy, but TV has continued to be a best friend of marketers for a long time. It's how brands got built, and it's how brands continue to get built. So no, I don't think TV is dead. And in fact, I absolutely love that statement that Td made earlier, that TV just had babies, because it just shows you that the family's only getting larger.
Yeah, I'm going to steal it. On our prep call too, we also talked about, Erwin Gottlieb used to say this all the time, but like if the first time that someone saw a TV commercial for a Mercedes was when they were 40 and could afford it, you wouldn't have built up like the brand equity.
Absolutely.
To get there. So I feel like TV is like a brand safe. There's no better way to build a brand than in television. It's just the definition of TV is kind of changing, and we need to use data and tech to figure out how to be more thoughtful.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the things that I always hear people say is, oh, but TV has so much waste. Waste in TV is actually a bonus. it's what helps you build a brand. So, I mean, Jamie, I love the car analogy you use, because I always say this is like half of the reason that people buy, not all, but half of the reason a lot of people buy luxury vehicles is to be seen in luxury vehicles because they've arrived. If we were only targeting those people who are in the luxury vehicle market, how would those other people that were like, how would we show off to our neighbors who aren't there yet? Like, how would they know that I've arrived in my BMW, you know? So how do you build a brand without making sure that those that aren't currently in your market know about your brand and aspire to want to buy it?
Well, yeah, and you also, we were talking about too, especially something like allergy pills. Like right now, if like anyone sneezes, like it's like you freak out, like you don't want to sneeze. So you were saying that people are more health conscious because of it. So can you talk about that behavior shift and how you guys are supporting it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, our goal at Santa Fe has always been about empowering people to be able to take control of their health. And so I think particularly at a time where we're in the middle of a pandemic, everything is a lot more scary. I mean, gosh, I know, me included, and I don't usually suffer allergies. So I go for a long walk and I come home and the next day I wake up with a sore throat. I'm like, gosh, what is that? You know? And so I think, you know, being able to give people control and making sure that they have allergy products available to them and all these other products that we produce helps them sleep better at night, understanding that, hey, you know what, this is just an allergy. This is not something that I need to take more seriously, right? And so I think our whole vision and the reason we exist is to be able to give people that control. And at times like this, that comes even more to the forefront of why that control as a consumer is important for you to be able to you may not get access to your doctor right away, but to have that control all the time to be able to proactively manage your health.
Yeah. So you guys are one of the brands that never went dark on television. Like you were in it from the beginning. So can you talk about, you know, why you guys decided to do that? Did you have COVID creative? Were you running regular creative? Like, how did you guys approach that?
Not at first. And in fact, some of our creative was, I mean, I wouldn't say, it would be a little bit tone deaf, I guess. Like, you know, we were an allergy brand and we were showing these great outdoors. And I think at the beginning of all this, people were afraid to leave their houses. I mean, it's definitely different today, and the summer was a bit different. But in the beginning, people were scared to be outdoors. They didn't know how this you know, virus was transmitted, and so people were minimizing their time outdoors. And so when we were showing these great outdoor shots with multiple people and cars going out, living their lives
through meadows, people are like,
exactly. So we definitely had to shift significantly, but we never did. To your point, we never stopped advertising. We recognized that, again, you know, to support our consumers and let them know that they can proactively manage their conditions. We wanted to continue to be out there as our brands. We definitely refocused which brands. We tried to focus on the brands that mattered most. And we certainly tried to, look at our creative assets and think about how could we tweak them to not be so tone deaf in this environment, but not also take advantage of this as well. So, I mean, look, we've got a slew of products, be it hand lotion, sleep aids, allergy products that suddenly took on a whole nother level of importance during the pandemic. And so it was important that our consumers knew that those products were available for them and what we bring, you know, in terms of being able to manage your own healthcare.
Yeah, like how did you guys support the e-commerce shift?
So I think our e-commerce shift, I mean, certainly we made a big shift to e-commerce. I think, and it wasn't just about more advertising on e-commerce. It was about making sure that our distribution channels were clear and open and that our products were available. I mean, in the beginning of this, whether it was because people couldn't get to the store, were scared to go to the store, you know, or they went to the store and the products were cleared out, because we were in those categories where you had pantry loading happening. You know, we wanted to make sure that people who needed access to our products had access to our products. And so we shifted a lot of our focus on making sure that we had our distribution channels clear. We started to use embedded technology in a lot of our ads to be able to allow people to buy now and understand where to shop, because where were our products available today? Were they on shelf? Were they going to be able to have access to them? And so I think, you know, a lot of that motivation came from just making sure that our products were accessible for those who were trying to get their hands on them.
Yeah. You also, I've heard you speak about audience first, right? Understanding the audience and then figuring out their journey. So like, to your point, you know, things change, life change, people reacting differently. So like, are there any insights about your audiences that you learned that you thought were interesting, or that you wouldn't think?
Well, so it's interesting because I think in some of our cases, right, so we have some pain products, And some of our audiences and people, I mean, they couldn't get out and exercise the same way. So we have some products that are really targeted to our older consumers who weren't getting the opportunity to spend time with their grandchildren. And so we really wanted to take, what mattered to our consumers and really think about how we could bring something back. So, on our Icy Hot and Aspercream products, we talked a lot about, like, we have a partnership with Shaquille O'Neal and our Icy Hot products. We started to work with Shaquille to come up with some at-home exercise routines so that people could still feel fit and people could still, not everybody was able to buy a Peloton. I mean, a lot of us did, but not everybody was able to buy a Peloton. So how do you continue to stay active in your home? And then, with Aspercream, we've always been about our older consumers. So, like, how do we celebrate those grandparents? And we created this idea of Grandparents Hour, where it was, helping grandparents understand how to, like, get on Zoom and, be able to connect with their grandchildren. Because that became so important at the beginning of this, is how do you still stay connected to family, particularly for those older audiences that, are really our most, like, fragile amongst our communities in terms of, this virus in general.
Yeah, that's like a really nice thing to do, like Grandparents Hour. I like that, because, like, my grandfather is in a nursing home right now, and it's hard. You can't see him, and, like, trying to get him to do Zoom, like, it's impossible. So that was a good idea. All right, so people are watching more TV than ever, but it is fragmenting across screens. To your point, like, their babies, the family's getting bigger. So how are you kind of addressing that in your planning?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of, we look at it from the top and we look at the bottom. I mean, Jamie, you brought up audience first, right? So, I think for those who wonder what a title head of experience planning means, I was the head of media. I've now become the head of experience planning, and that is really about having an investment agnostic approach to understanding our consumers and our consumer journeys, and making sure that we understand how to meet our consumers at every part of their journey, whether that be in your sort of upper funnel traditional media channels, or whether that's even shopper, e-commerce, and trade. How do you look at that agnostically to deliver against what your consumers are looking for, as opposed to having this sort of siloed approach to planning your investments? And I think along with that, comes the idea of CTV, OTT, all of these things. And I think there's a couple ways to look at it. One, when you're in the upper funnel and you're looking at like your goals around brand equity and building your brands and really driving sort of mass awareness, whether it's awareness of your product or top of mind awareness of your products that you're building, or top of mind awareness for brands that people already know, but that you want to keep in their mindset. I think CTV and OTT become almost like an extension day part, right? So how do you increase reach against those audiences that might be harder to find in linear television today? But I also think you can look at it from your precision audiences too. And in those cases, you may not be adding those data layers on, because you're just actually extending your reach of your sort of demographic audiences. But when you think about it from your precision target audiences, you're doing all this work to precisely hit the right people. But scale is always an issue in with your precision audiences. How do you reach enough people? You might be reaching the right people, but how do you reach enough of those right people? And I think CTV, OTT can be a great add to being able to drive incremental reach against all those precision tactics that you have, to be able to create quality environments that your ads can run in, longer opportunities for you to put longer form content out, and unskippable content, and increase scale against a lot of those precision audiences.
But do you feel satisfied? Like, I think we all intuitively know the audiences are there. You can't ignore them, right? But do you know, like, are you certain that it's an unduplicated impression? Like, how do you balance that? Because, like, it's kind of like the beginning of digital. We all knew that audiences were there, so you couldn't ignore digital anymore. But you kind of like planned your TV plan, you planned your digital plan, and like didn't understand like the duplication. So are you satisfied with that? Like, do you feel like you have enough insight into if it's reach building or frequency building?
No, of course not. I mean, with all the walled gardens out there, I mean, we live in a world where we really don't understand duplication at all. But I do think if you start with what your job to be done is, and you're looking at all of your investments delivering against your jobs to be done, some duplication isn't bad, some frequency isn't bad. I think there's work to be done there, Jamie. I mean, certainly, I think we really need to understand that. But it's CTV, OTT is just one part of it. I mean, really, it's the walled gardens, right? Like, I mean, there's large investments in those areas that we have no idea if those are new audiences. You know, we can kind of back into reach on those. You know, we look at them as incremental. You know, we can measure them through ROI. We can measure them through a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, we don't know how much incrementality is there, but we do continue to spend there, right? So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And that's why I think, you know, it's really, to me, this whole idea of bringing data to TV is really the start of evolution in all of our channels to make them all more accountable. And I think we have to work as an industry to start breaking down some of these walled gardens.
Well, yeah, you have the money, so stop spending it.
Oh, trust me, I have those conversations a lot.
Okay, so are you like with the, you know, with CTV, OTT, you know, it's kind of like early days of like figuring this out and scaling it. But as you're starting to include it on plans, are you using consistent data across all screens? So same target across TV, digital, OTT, CTV, like, is it the same consistent targeting, whether it's demo or?
Not necessarily, because again, it goes back to that plan, right? So if I'm looking at lower funnel conversion, maybe I'm really looking at past purchase behavior of my competitive audiences or my own audiences, right? When I'm looking at upper funnel, I'm really looking at larger scale audiences that may have a proclivity, and it varies honestly by category also. I mean, listen, I mean, if you're not an allergy sufferer, I'm not going to convince you to take an allergy product. I mean, that's just never going to happen, right? So where I think on an allergy brand, data becomes more important because there's probably potentially more waste against audiences that are never going to be in your market. Gosh, who couldn't use hand and body lotion, right? So I think, again, it goes back to we set our data strategy up based on what we're trying to accomplish. And so our data layers are very much dependent on where a channel sits. And by the way, channels can sit in multiple places, but where we're using the investment against what task we're doing. So if it's something that we're doing, because I mean, we've had this conversation as well. Why is consumer promotions and couponing a whole different activity than everything else? If we're audience targeting competitive users with coupons, why can't we do that when we're competitively targeting our audiences at the lower funnel for conversion? For those that we know want a coupon, that's going to help them make their decision, we should be offering that coupon right there, not doing it as an individual siloed exercise separately. So I think, I'm not avoiding your answer. I'm just saying we're using data and our data strategy different based on different parts of the journey, based on what we're trying to accomplish.
Answer the question. I'm just kidding. Do you think that you guys are starting to, at least, it sounds like, lay the foundation to understand like what's the value of an impression against this KPI? And then ultimately you guys are building like to understand what levers to pull based on the channel and the KPI of the campaign.
Exactly. I mean, I think one of the mistakes that we all make, and me included, right? Once we were able to measure things like offline sales metrics, ROI, short-term ROI, we thought that was the holy grail. Well, we better measure everything against this. And guess what? Not surprisingly, not all channels were driving great short-term ROI. And then you kind of sit there and you scratch your head and you're like, God, I really thought I wrote this amazing media plan, and not all my channels are delivering. How am I going to go talk to my management about it? And then you take a step back and you're like, but that wasn't the goal. That wasn't the goal, right? And so I think that comes back to, what are your long-term metrics versus your short-term metrics? And how do you ensure that you're measuring the right thing? Because gosh, if you don't get that right, you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so I think that's also part of this whole thing. I mean, none of these are sort of mutually exclusive. It's like your data strategy, your measurement strategy, campaign goals, your consumers' place within the journey, they're all tied so closely together. If you don't map this out and get this right up front, and by the way, there's no set it and forget it anymore. When you constantly are learning and evolving, you're going to be measuring everything based on the wrong KPIs, and you're going to be chasing the wrong goals. I mean, someone said something provocative to me one day where they were saying, gosh, I wish we could get rid of short-term ROI, because short-term ROI, and while this is provocative, it drives us to continue to try to target that person that would have bought us anyway. Because obviously the reason that some of the times that they're the shortest, they have the strongest ROI, because they're already a fan of your product. And so how do you grow your business going after your lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah, I mean, it also, it sounds like too, what you guys are doing is like not stopping at like, yes, this worked, no, this didn't work, but getting to like the why did it work and why didn't it work? And then also too, I think there's like this fear in general about things not working. And to your point, if it's not the right KPI, it's not going to work. But like bringing data to TV, like across whatever screen, is like starting to understand like what it does, why it works, and why it doesn't work. Like you need to actually have visibility, and you can't be afraid to fail. Like I remember when campaigns would happen and like someone would walk into my office and be like, it didn't deliver a good KPI. Like, what should I do? I'm afraid to show the client. I'm like, well, tell them why it didn't work so then they could use that data. Like, you shouldn't be afraid to fail. I mean, I know it's different, but
I mean, a lot of the reason why people like us sit where we sit is not because we're smarter than anyone else, but because we have some level of experience. And someone told me once, trust your gut, right? If you did something and you expected it to deliver something and your measurement doesn't deliver what you thought, don't throw it out. Go back and really re-examine whether you had set it up for success, and mindset of, I expect this X did Y. Well, first of all, is Y bad? But if I expected it to do X and X is considered the better solution, then go make it do X, because you did then, you know, I mean, like, trust your gut. I mean, some things, yeah, you can be wrong about, absolutely. But more often than not, you either need to refine what your expectations were, or you need to refine your approach.
Okay. Are you guys starting to rely more, like everyone says, like data? You know, I think some people are using it well. Some people are just kind of throwing around the word. In order to use data and actually scale it, like you also need technology. So are you guys having a technology shift, like, which is interesting to look at from a marketer side?
We are. I mean, look, our organization in particular sort of exists in its current state it's only been a year and a half. You know, we were the Chatham organization, you know, we became the Santa Fe Consumer Health Organization. You know, it was a shift in New Jersey with a lot of new people brought in. And I think part of it was to look at that data and ad tech strategy and make sure that we were set for the future. Because I think a lot of things that Chatham was doing, they were doing wonderfully, and the businesses were healthy. But without evolution, you can't continue to be as healthy as you were. And so I think that huge area of focus for us is understanding not just the data, but the ad tech required to support our data vision. And so who are those right partners? And I think to that point, what do you need to own versus rent versus borrow, right? So, I mean, a lot of what a lot of people are going through right now is trying to really understand that, because not everything is worth owning, but there are certain things that definitely are worth owning.
Yeah, I mean, a question actually just came in. So like when you're evaluating like partners, like how are you guys evaluating partners? What's a valuable partner? How are partners adding value? Like how should partners approach working with you?
I think partnership is about all ships rising. You know, I mean, I say this to all of our current partners is, I think for too long, there's been not aligned goals. Winning is when everyone wins. And so I tell our partners all the time, partnership is you not winning at our expense, but you winning with us. When we all win, there's more money to go around for everyone. And so I think the key fundamental piece of partnership for us at Santa Fe is making sure that our partners have taken the time to understand what it's going to take for our business to win. And we love sharing the wealth. We win, you win, everyone wins, right? But like, it's got to be about learning our business and coming up with bespoke ideas for us, not necessarily off the shelf solutions that are revenue driving for the partner, but not necessarily going to solve the problems as we've addressed them. But we do think partnership starts with a lot of transparency too. So if we don't bring our partners to the table and really share what our problems are, we can't expect them to help us solve them.
Yeah. Do you like, you know, obviously, like, did you find a little bit of this experience like freeing because you had to like think about media a little bit differently? You know, I think it shook it up, right? So we had to be a little bit more agile, think of things differently. Like, do you see like kind of like excitement around the organization just because you have to think a little bit differently?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's easy to fall into old routine. It's easy to turn around the same plan year over year. I think that particularly the pandemic has accelerated the consumer behavior in certain ways that we didn't expect to happen so fast. But it's put all of us as organized as marketers on our toes. and said what parts of our business were broken that weren't able to adapt fast enough to the changing behavior, and how do we make sure this never happens again. So I think, yes, you're absolutely right. It's both scary and it's both exciting at the same time, because it really stimulates change within an organization and sort of sets an organization on fire to go chase those areas where we know we're not going to be able to keep up, as behavior changes.
And like, are your budgets like finally fluid? Like, is it not like bucketed? This is my TV budget. This is my video budget. Like, is it finally, do you think this is help accelerating actually, like, I know everyone said that was the way it was, but actually making it happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because that's where a lot of the dynamics of come in, right? And so, you have your organization wanting to see certain partners that are good global partners, they want to see commitments in those areas. I think as an organization, really, and particularly me, sort of leading investment, I've really had to take a strong stance in saying, when new digital partners come in saying, hey, we want to do an upfront with you, I try to explain to them, we don't like doing upfronts. We don't even like doing upfronts with TV. Why would we want to continue to create new bad behavior in areas that didn't require those kind of commitments? I think, look, the reality of the situation is if the budget is fluid, everyone has the opportunity to earn as much of our money as they can possibly earn. If, once you take off all of those handcuffs of commitments. So that's one of the first things I say to my partners when they come in and say, well, what's the budget? The budget is what you're going to earn yourself, right? So perform and you can have it all. I mean, honestly,
like show me the data, right? Like
exactly.
show me what works and why it works, and
exactly
learn together.
Exactly.
Okay, you are blowing up. Okay, there are a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to shift and start to ask you some of the questions from the audience. So you mentioned CTV, OTT to avoid skippable ads. Just curious why clients and agencies, or what clients and agencies are buying in skippable environments in the first place? Like, why are you buying in a skippable environment?
Well, because, audiences still continue to be there. I mean, I think it's a fair question. I mean, I definitely think that, skippable environments, it's a really tough thing because, I mean, who's going to say we're not going to advertise on YouTube, right? I mean, audiences are there and there's content in which you want to align with. It just makes us as marketers have to be really smart and think about how do we use those first 3 seconds of the ad? How do we make sure that those first 3 seconds and when to use them? And again, goes back to Jamie talking about where in the journey you use them. If you know you're only going to get 3 seconds, it better be in a place where you're just trying to look at top of mind awareness. And then that's all it's for. It's a quick billboard. It's a billboard for your brand, when you've already done some of the work in terms of like why your brand is important. It's just driving that top of mind awareness.
And how do you guys handle brand safety? Like in OTT, CTV, are you guys buying like premium TV environments, like focused and connected television? Or are you opening it up to the audience wherever they're watching?
I think safety is still very important to us. I mean, I think it's a challenge that's been hard. Is there seems to be different rules for different platforms. And I think, TV has always been a platform that's been designed as a safe environment. And in fact, we've always had strong guidelines on content. Some of those content guidelines don't exist in other channels. So I think particularly as you've seen some of the challenges in social this year, we've actually said, how important is safety to our brands? I mean, and increasingly the answer is very important. And so I think that's going to continue to drive shifts back to looking for those environments where you can have some kind of guarantee of where your ads are showing up.
Yeah, I know it's crazy because we used to always say too about television, like the data always came back that anything in television like would significantly outperform other channels, but it's probably because of things like viewability. Like there's not a bot sitting in your living room.
Right.
Like if it's happening on TV, like it's running and what's happening in premium content.
And if your ad runs against something unsavory, you can pick up the phone and call someone and say, hey, how did this happen? I mean,
Those calls are always fun.
Exactly. They are totally fun.
Like when I worked on Pizza Hut and we would get those calls, I would be like, well, why are you watching Girls Next Door? Like if you're watching it and you're in the target, like what's the big deal? But
exactly.
People get like crazy with those type of calls.
Exactly.
How do you win internal support to try emerging advertising mediums like CTV, OTT, addressable, anything that's kind of a little bit outside of the traditional box? Like, how do you get people to champion it inside?
Well, I think it really comes down to being able to articulate what and why in some cases it might be worth the premium, right? And so again, I think I'm like a broken record on this. If you can really focus on what you're trying to accomplish and what the role of your channels are, it'll almost tell its own story as to why you're doing it, right? So if it is about upper funnel, the reality of the situation is you need to drive reach.
Yeah.
And you need to drive share of voice, particularly against your competitors. And you're not going to be able to do it without the addition of those things. And if you're doing it in other areas of your plan, it's probably also about safety and scale. And so I think contextualizing the spend against what its role is always helps to have those conversations internally, because it's a lot harder for someone to say no if you say this is why we're doing it, and it doesn't just feel like one of many levers that is sort of a nice to have, or something that you are doing because you think it's the right thing to do. So I would just say be articulate about why you're doing these things and the choices you're making.
Both of us speak so fast. So I think this is the longest we've ever actually like talked to each other, because we get like 20 questions in, 20 questions out, and be done like talking in 10 minutes. All right, this is an easy question. What's your favorite TV show?
My favorite TV show, it's a hard question because I have been binge watching like everybody else. And I found through COVID that I probably never matured past a 17-year-old girl. So I have been watching, and you're going to hate it because I'm talking about something not ad supported right now, but I have been binging on like the reruns or the seasons of Riverdale. And I loved it because as a child, I read the Archie comics. And so I watched Riverdale and I was like, I really stopped 17 years old because my 11-year-old is catching up to me in terms of the same programs that we're starting to watch.
So I say that I watch TV like a tween. My husband will come home. He's like, you are like the dumbest smart person. Like, why is it always reality? I've been binging like Seventh Heaven or like the Gilmore Girls. Like literally, I'm like, that's why I'm like,
the Gilmore. To your point, if we're going old school, Gilmore Girls, hands down, probably my favorite show ever. But perhaps, Jamie, it is because you and I both talk so fast that we love the characters because, we could be in the Gilmore Girls.
This is very true. Okay, a popular question too that's come up a couple times too. Being everyone's trying to like learn and advance, like what advice would you give your younger self in your career?
So I would say the advice I'd give myself is look for the opportunity in them. I always go back and I say the hardest projects I've ever had, the hardest managers I've ever had to work for, the projects that seem impossible were the ones that I grew the most from. And I would say that about this pandemic too. For much of this pandemic, I felt like this was the worst thing that ever happened. And I told everyone, I was like, I'm going to turn this into the greatest opportunity. My husband and I are thinking about like, do we do a relocation to somewhere like Costa Rica? And do we make the most out of this and make this an experience that we've never had before instead of looking at the negative? So I'd say constantly look for the silver lining in every bad experience, because that's probably going to be one of the best experiences when you look back on it.
All right, that's awesome advice. Thank you so much. I think that this is the end of our session.
Well, I see Ritesh, so I'm assuming that means that's our cue.
Just the gong, we're over.
Right. Yeah, we're like the violin music that starts to play at the end of your acceptance speech.
I know. I feel like you're going to take my Oscar away soon.
Yeah, this is like a low budget version. Let's bring the moderator in because we can't afford violins.
And then play the commercial.
Yeah, exactly. Before we go there, Dana, I love what you said about, anyone that asks you about budget availability. The answer is prove it and you can have as much as you want. I guess I'm going to try that with my 15-year-old. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to send her to you.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much to both Dana and Jamie for a great conversation. Learned a lot. Thanks very much. And exactly like we said, we are going to pop in with a very short clip before we bring in the next set of speakers. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I guess the answer to that question is yeah, sign me up. I'd like 10 of those, please. Thanks so much. It's been a really good afternoon of sharing and some great learnings that are coming up to date. So thanks again for being with us today, and please keep those questions and questions coming. I know the panel really appreciates that. So next up, please welcome to the virtual stage Kurt Rao, the Senior Vice President and the CTO of Tegna, and Tim Jenkins, who is the Executive Vice President, Head of Audience and Identity Solutions for Cadent, for a fireside chat on a very important topic. I think we alluded to it in a couple of other talks just before we got here today, but the future of identity in television. Again, a frequently discussed topic, and we have two experts on it. And I'm really excited to hear from both of you. So thank you so much. Over to you, Tim and Kurt. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ritesh.
COVID-enabled environment here where, oh, I see, start video. Got it. We're ready. See, that's what I mean. Highly judgmental in this world where we're invited into everybody's homes, and I'm spending more time looking around at their environment and trying to determine how much they make versus like actually focusing on the meeting for the first 5 minutes. And so if you want to pass that judgment on me, I'm living in a barn right now outside of Cincinnati, which is probably about the least sexy environment you could probably do a Zoom video in. But anyway, that brings me to kind of the first topic, Kurt, which you being on the broadcast side and you know, having to deal with this COVID environment and the stay-at-home orders and trying to put on live shows in 61 different, I think you've got 62 stations and 51 different broadcast markets. How in the world do you pull that off?
Yeah, you know, Tim, thank you for having me. And, well, it's been a crazy and interesting year, and you know, I think it's, you know, I want to say it's things that technology people dream of, problems to be solved. But you know, listen, I think when all of this hit, you know, we had to allow for 6,000 employees to work from home, you know, in a hurry. And you know, the television business, I mean, it's a 24/7, you know, 24/7 business. You got people that work shifts. And so we did, you know, at the very basics, we just didn't even have laptops for every single person. And just you know, we're trying to procure 1,000 laptops during the height of COVID was not, you know, was just another impossible task. Took us a lot longer, but you know, we got that done. You know, the second part was, you know, we still had to maintain on-air operations, right? So we still needed to bring people into the studios. You know, we've done a lot of things remotely, so I could produce, you know, graphics and video and things like that remotely. But ultimately, you know, I got a newscast using 8 to 9 hours of news a day, and I needed to bring people into the studio. So, you know, how do you keep them safe? How do you keep them protected? How do you make sure they don't commingle with others was a challenge. We got through that. And probably the largest lesson we learned, and listen, most companies go through, you know, you have a central set of firewalls and, you know, and the VPN services. Well, when you're trying to upload high quality video, that just doesn't work, right? So people working from home, you know, we had to give them units that, you know, that bonded cell phones to get you the bandwidth because they didn't have the upload speeds, you know, from their internet providers. We've gone through a lot to make sure we can continue to work right in this remote, you know, COVID-like environment.
Yeah, well, I wonder, you know, what kind of guidance do you actually give the on-air talent when they're trying to, you know, do something from home, and you're looking at their backgrounds, and you know, you're thinking, wait a minute, I don't think you actually want like the neighbor's bull in the picture. Or which actually came up in one of my sessions where a window was open and the bull from the back pasture was literally in view, unfortunately.
Yeah. Listen, and you know, you get into the minutia of, you know, we had to send lighting things at home, right? The ring lights for people's homes, telling them have, you know, find a, you know, as close to a green screen that you can or a white screen. You know, keep it as simple and So a lot of things went into those, and that's why I said, we had to figure all of this out in a hurry because we've never had to do it.
Yeah.
Except maybe in a hurricane-like scenario, but even there, not at the scale that we've had to execute.
Yeah, it had to have been an incredible challenge. So,
Yeah.
hey, a little birdie told me that we have this election coming up next week, and I'm sure not many people have really been paying attention to that, but I'm certain it's had an impact on you in the local broadcast space. So, what have you actually seen in terms of sort of activity? Has this sort of changed, viewership habits and things of that nature? And then, more importantly, like, how has data played a role in this political season on the local broadcast level?
Yeah. Yes, we operate two different businesses. The way I think of Tegna as a company, right? We are a traditional local broadcast, and certainly, we've enjoyed the benefits of political ad spend this year. I think it's through the roof, for us and for everyone else in this space. Primarily because, Tim, I mean, when you think of local broadcasts, it is probably the last and the closest to a community, right? It's the way, and listen, for many of us, I live in the New York area. It's not, local television is not as big a deal. But when you're in Columbus, Ohio, or Des Moines, Iowa, I mean, that is all the media that you get, right? And that's your feel of community. And from a political perspective, people trying to connect to their local audiences, to their constituents, that's probably the best way to. So it's certainly been a huge both on our linear side. The second business we operate is an over-the-top platform called Premion, where data has played a huge part in assembling audiences, right? I mean, where we are able to find people that that have an interest in a certain category or a certain kind of theme, right? And all of those kinds of things have been really, really critical in this political season.
Okay. So based on the data spending levels that you've seen, what's your prediction?
Prediction in terms of who's going to win?
Trump or Biden? Come on.
That's a tough question. I'm gonna have to plead the fifth there. But listen, regardless of who wins, I think it's gonna be an interesting next 4 years for this country.
Yeah, I was hoping for some inside baseball there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've tuned into any of the previous sessions, but one of the themes has been sort of change in viewing behaviors, and we've heard some folks talk about one of the most exciting things that happened at the local level was the return of sports. Mm-hmm. And particularly in smaller markets where the local college team is the event, right? And so without that coming into sort of this football season, you have had a challenge finding, I think, eyeballs that are really kind of highly dedicated to that particular screen at that point in time. So how have you seen sort of viewing behaviors change during this whole pandemic season?
Yeah, this is the way I've been thinking about it, Tim. As global as this pandemic is, its impact has been incredibly local, right? And so what I mean is every one of us, as living in our communities, worries about what happens to your kid's school, right? When does that school open? Where do they go? What happens when it opens? How safe is it? What about your local restaurants, your all of those kinds of things. And I think as local broadcasters, we have had a banner year in terms of serving our communities, right? Especially at Tegna. And it's all about, I go back to, I think, we're all craving, information about what's happening in the community, what's safe, what's the the rate of the pandemic, within your walls. And so, we've seen viewership across all of our platforms drive north, if you will, but certainly difference in patterns, right? And so, look, when we all started working from home, I think we all getting up a little later. So morning viewership, came down. But afternoon and evening viewership has risen as people, or even midday, has risen as a result of that. And I think at Tegna, one of the things that we pride ourselves as a great broadcaster is to deepen the relationship with that community with what we call facts, not fear journalism, right? And at the end of the day, that's really, I think, what's been resonating, at least in our audiences, and why we believe people are tuning into Tegna stations.
Got it. And so are you seeing people like focus on particular are they more tuned into the news these days, the local news, than they have been? Where are they really spending their time?
Yeah, so I think when you think of local broadcasters, Tim, our primary product is news, right? And what we call lifestyle shows, right? And so, and everything else is either kind of syndicated programming like Wheel of Fortune, and then that was certainly in the early part of the pandemic, right? There was no sports. Sports has come back in a big way, but most of that I'll say is network related, right? So you got the NBA, the NFL. That certainly brings a tremendous amount of traffic to us. But we've seen viewership across both of those categories, if you will. But certainly local broadcast has been driving in terms of our news product.
Got it. So and also how has sort of the shutdown of the small business, the local businesses, impacted advertising in your local markets?
Yeah, well, and I think you'll see this, when the shutdown first happened, I think impacted everybody, right? And, we're starting to see advertisers come back as things and businesses have started to open back up, especially, the retail sector, the restaurants, right? All of those, as they come back, they're starting to spend money in the local businesses. But, the second quarter and third quarter were rough. Right. And then, I think as you're also starting to see, I mean, the journal yesterday reported, I think auto sales are back up. Right. And, and you're starting to see, I think in some of the bigger cities, as people go back to work, there's more of a fear, if you will, of relying on public transportation. Yeah. So, people are starting to say, if I have to go to work, I think I'm not taking a bus or a train or a subway. So some of that at least is starting to translate into, marketing and advertising spend back on our properties.
Got it. Great. Okay. Well, look, the primary topic of today, even though I really wanted to kind of understand, what was really happening in the local market was identity in TV. Yep. And so, we've had a long history together. We actually sort of grew up in the OTT space together. Our platform really came together at the same time. Premion, your OTT network, was on the rise, and we partnered, I think, very effectively at the beginning and really kind of helped grow each other's businesses. So, given that, what role are you actually seeing in identity today? And in particular, I find your situation to be interesting because not only are you a local broadcaster, you have owned and operated digital properties and quite a few, and we've worked with you on a number of those and seen different engagement levels. And now you have this very successful OTT network called Premion that you're trying to balance spend, and you're attracting dollars not only on a local level but also on a national level, and trying to sort of stitch all that together. So what role has identity played in sort of each one of those channels?
Yeah, so Tim, I'm going to break it down into maybe three broad areas. We think about identity, right? So the first thing that is still in the early innings that we've spent a decent amount of time thinking about this is what I think is the holy grail on the content side, right? Which is, can you consolidate all of the digital signals that consumers leave, right? Whether it's on social, website visits, right? All of those kinds of things, to really understand, from our business, what content truly resonates with them, right? I'd love to figure out if the audience that we're reaching is a PhD level audience or a high school level audience, because then you could train your on-air talent on the kinds of words they use, the number of words a minute they speak, and whether they're truly resonating with the audience, right? And that is, that's something that is the holy grail for us, to be able to pull all of these things together and really help influence what content we make even before we make it, right? So that I'd say, again, early, but there's a bit of focus there for us. On the television advertising side, we've been doing a lot of things around what we call, or marketers typically call, attribution, right? We have a product called Tegna Attribution, and as part of that, what we're able to do is really measure who saw an ad, what action did they take from watching that ad, And does that action result in a website visit or a walk-in into a retail location? And does that convert into a, into a conversion? So it's a big step for us. We've been in market for a couple of years with this product. And identity there is again a big thing, because ultimately what consumers or marketers want to know is, what consumers watched it, what platform did they watch it, and Tim, you referenced Premion, which is our OTT network. We're able to look at how many people watched an ad on linear, how many people watched it on OTT, how many of them resulted in a website, and then pull it all together to really give marketers those insights about consumers.
So you have a lot of technologies at play, right? In that environment, you've got, your sort of unwired local broadcast, which is very, very difficult to, resolve that down to an individual or an individual household even. And then, you've got your owned and operated properties, digital properties, where you can get right down to an individual. Yeah. And then you've got your OTT, where you literally can, through platforms like ours, and so I'm not ashamed to have a little advertisement there, but properties like ours that allow you to be able to associate to a household. So how do you make those technologies work together to sort of give you a unified view of your consumer, if you will, across those various screens?
Yeah, so Tim, I think we work with companies yourself. We build capabilities on platforms ourselves, but ultimately, you've got to stitch all of these things together, right? And what I say is you try to, find the breadcrumbs that go together and try to create associations. I think a few years away, maybe decades away. What we're able to do today is, to a certain extent, figure out how deterministic you can be, and then how probabilistic you need to be, right? And the more, the goal is to be as much deterministic as possible. And certainly on your digital platforms, you could be a lot more deterministic than on some of your linear platforms, where it's a lot more probabilistic.
Yeah, and are you finding with advertisers that they're accepting of that difference, or are they of this mindset where they're really trying to demand more of that? Get me as close to that one-to-one as possible.
Yeah, so I think there are different types of advertisers, Tim. So, when we think of our Premion business, much of that is an extension of our linear, traditional TV business. And a lot of the buyers that buy on Premion, expect behavior in terms of ad campaigns the same way it delivers on television, right? And then you have folks that have gotten really, really savvy in that space and will want to go really, really deep, right? And and get into, I'm looking for people that are millennially minded, that are in the market for a car or a specific type of car because I have a family that's growing, right? And find me audiences across your platform and portfolio of content that meets that need, right? And so you are seeing different types of requests coming in from advertisers, and our goal is to try and meet those needs as closely as possible.
Yeah. So, local broadcast and OTT are sort of couldn't be more different animals. So yeah. How are you actually seeing data play in each one of those channels?
Yeah. So I think so let's separate it out, right? I mean, on the traditional TV side, I mean, your challenges, that's a one-way stream, right? And we have to rely on people like Nielsen and ComScore to provide, what's traditionally the currency of ratings, but then couple that with the insights that they provide about consumers, right? But we do that, we take that, we do a lot of independent research on our own. But ultimately, when I look at, the audience that I'm serving in Minneapolis, right, we come up with what is the makeup of that audience, right? What's that, what percentage of that is audience are what we will call Costco moms, right? What audience are soccer moms, right? And then you start to think about, how do you cater to those audiences? What's the benefit of, and which one is a larger audience that you go after? What's more profitable, both from a content side, but then, that translates into an advertising side, right? And so that's certainly on the television side, we've done a lot of that kind of work across our markets to really try and profile, what's our core audience look like, right? On the On the digital and the OTT side, as you know, we have access to a lot of great data. Working with companies like yourself, and we're able to get to really, really close levels of depth, right? And the challenge in local ultimately is, unlike network or cable, I mean, you're working with a smaller universe. So ultimately, scale is you got to make sure you can hit the scale, and you try to do one too many factors, you just don't have that scale. But so far, I think we're getting fairly sophisticated in what we're able to reach there.
So yeah, given sort of the two different approaches and the ability to target down at different levels, TV is still kind of working its way through to living up to the promise of sort of a single view of an audience across various screens, right? And yeah, technology is helping sort of bring it together, but it's a little harder. It's a little harder on the traditional and wired broadcast side, linear side, where you're having to use sort of tools that are more modeled than sort of really scaled one-to-one type solutions. But there are scenarios where that linear and that OTT can work well together, right? So what's been Tegna's experience with sort of combining OTT with linear and vice versa?
Yeah, so let's think about, what I talked about, the attribution product, right? We could do that across both of those platforms, right? And our attribution product is based on people watching smart TVs on glass. So it is very much like a digital experience, and we're able to to get very precise on the household that's watching it, not necessarily the individual, but you can make patterns, right? I mean, it's kind of sort of the age-old, people watching sports may tend to be more male than female, but those are a little more generalized, but you can start to make those kind of associations. But what we're able to go to marketeers and advertisers with is a package that says, if you're trying to reach consumers, right, and make sure that they're actually resulting in conversion, we can reach them on all of these platforms that Tegna has, and then and put a case for it together on how that conversion across all of these platforms.
Right. So in your situation, you've seen a lot of different use cases for linear plus OTT. And where are you seeing that most used today? How are you seeing that most used today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the types of clients like furniture retailers, as an example, right, who are trying to drive walk-ins to their store, right, or auto dealerships, they're trying to reach consumers that are both kind of sort of reach as well as depth. And so they are they're the kinds of folks we go after and say, this would be a great product for you, right? And then we try to reach audiences for them across all of our product lines, and then aggregate that back across, right? And then you do have, Tim, certainly you have advertisers that just want to reach people on OTT or on linear, and and we could do that same service for them. But we certainly show that. The other thing that I think we've also seen through this, through the last 2 years, is that the overlap between OTT and linear is not always as big, especially in in certain categories of consumers. And so there's an added value on why an advertiser should try to reach consumers in multiple platforms, to drive effective kind of conversion.
So in situations where you have somebody who's trying to just do a simple reach extension, for example, are they really focused more today with the OTT piece on demo or age and gender, or are they really trying to employ data and take it to the next level?
Yeah, I think it depends on the types of buyers. Like I said, I mean, a traditional television buyer, I think, is most comfortable, even in an OTT environment, mirroring how they buy television, right? And then you have, and within agencies now, you have kind of the traditional linear buyers, and then you have, the digital buyers. The digital buyers traditionally, I think, are much more, data driven. But you are starting to see a lot of the traditional linear TV buyers applying data, want to do more with data, want to know more about the insights that they can gather from these campaigns that they're running, and then kind of sort of how do you use that as input for the next set of campaigns that they run with us.
Right. So one of the challenges that we've seen here at Cadent has been the traditional TV buyer who, wants to, whether it's experiment or really start to leverage OTT, really tries to buy it at sort of the same level that they're buying their traditional linear buys, right? They want to do one-to-one network alignment, and it's almost more just trying to get that at the network or that particular program level, which of course isn't the real promise of OTT. OTT is supposed to be, or CTV, that next level where you can actually use much richer data sets. You can get this down to a much more granular level and really not only drive the measure business outcomes, right? So, everybody kind of has a view on this. What's your view on what it's going to take to bring traditional TV buyers over to where they're doing more of a true audience buy?
Yes, I think we're still fairly early time in this process. There's lots of reasonings, right? I mean, when I kind of coming from a technology background, the platforms that currently exist that support either how agencies buy and transact, or sellers sell and transact, are fairly legacy, right? And so just those things I think require a lift, if you will, to be able to support outcomes and impressions and what I would generally call a common currency to be able to go across platforms, right? And so, they are, the partners and vendors are all working on this. And it's kind of sort of, I think, a little bit of a chicken and egg, because I think the buyers are not necessarily ready for it, but, because maybe the budgets are not in place the way they come down. But ultimately, I think, we're on a path where you'll, over the next few years, and make OTT and television buying, I think, much more seamless, with a common currency, with a common type of measurement on outcomes, and then with the plumbing that's required to make it less cumbersome than it is today.
Great, thanks, Kurt. So we have a lot of questions, and actually, it'll take me longer to sort through them than to actually answer them. But so let me kind of get down to a couple of things that we're gonna satisfy a couple of techies in this room. And the first question is around ATSC 3.0.
Yep.
And for you might want to just take a minute, because a lot of marketers on the call that might not understand what that is. Explain what it is and explain how that actually can make a difference in the local broadcast space.
Yeah, so in many of our markets, local television is distributed to consumers in multiple ways, right? You can get it through your satellite providers like a DirecTV, or your traditional cable providers like a Comcast. But in growing markets, we also distribute it over the air, right? What used to be called the rabbit ear antenna has been replaced by powerful, indoor antennas. And as people cut the cord or shave the cord, right, we have seen an increase in what's called as over-the-air OTA antenna reception by consumers. So as with ATSC 3.0 is the next generation of television, which makes television very similar to a broadband experience. So what that enables us is, I could send a broadcast out on over the air and receive back from that television. So all the things that you could do in digital, like data targeting, identity, consumer reach, right? It all becomes a reality on the advertising side. And then certainly from a content perspective, that gets exciting is, we can also do contextual content, right? And I can make that TV experience look like Netflix. Make it, so you'll imagine you're watching the show and you're able to click a button on your remote and say, I want more information. And up pops a menu of VOD content that may be, additional information around that. And then I could, and for broadcasters, again, a lot of these models have to be proven out, but you could then start to think about, do you do that additional as as a subscription model, or as an ad option, ad supported model? So again, very, very early. But Tegna as a company is committed to ATSC 3.0. We've launched in Portland, Oregon early this year, and this year we'll be in 4 other markets. And the industry as a whole will be in the top 40 markets by the end of next year.
Yeah. Great, thanks. So next question. So when everything is back to normal, I don't know how we're ever going to redefine normal, right? I don't know what normal is going to be, but when everything is back to normal, how will your industry have changed, and will it have changed permanently?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of us, we've learned a lot, right? So if we had tried to produce content in a remote capacity as a tech or a business project pre-COVID, I think that would have been a tough, that certainly would have been a tough endeavor to go. I think this pandemic has really shown us that we could do things that we never imagined we could do, right? And so we are going through the process of rethinking, right? What are things that continue to make sense to do it the way we used to do it versus how we've learned to do it during COVID? And then does it make sense to continue, right, doing some things in the old fashion or the new fashion? But I fundamentally think, like every other industry, we are going to fundamentally rethink, what makes sense going forward.
Great, thanks. So, okay, another one with cross-device campaigns. Are you finding it challenging when it comes to reconciliation? In other words, the orchestration issues across the various platforms. You use one platform to deliver ad in your local broadcast business. You use another platform for OTT, and where you're trying to synchronize things. What kind of challenges are you having sort of making that happen, orchestrating that, and then reconciling the results?
Yeah, it's not an easy feat by any means, and I think the delivery mechanisms are all very different today, and so it's a cumbersome process. And Tim, that goes back to what I was saying before. I think the plumbing is not in place today, which inhibits the true cross-function capabilities and the opportunities that people want to take advantage of, both on the buy side and the sell side. But we're all making strides in making improvements there. And automating as much of that as possible and integrating it as much as possible.
Got it. Okay. So let's see. So are you finding new technologies to be more effective today? Or are you thinking about technologies differently than before the pandemic started?
Well, I think, I don't know about thinking about new technologies differently. I mean, we're certainly looking for new technologies, but as I shared, Tim, the lessons coming out of COVID are asking us to reimagine how we process business, in the past, and how can technology help us, right? So things like AI now, is becoming, more mainstream. Our ability to produce content, in a very different fashion other than physically going into a building are things we're looking at. And our challenges, listen, one of the things that we know is we've been able to do this within a COVID environment. And to some people will say we do it at scale. The question is, can you do it truly at scale all the time in an economical model that makes sense?
Okay, so let's talk ratings, because all marketers love to talk about ratings, right? So on your local broadcast stations, how do you see your ratings in 5 years from today?
Well, I probably the wrong person to ask that question. Look, I would hope the ratings continue to drive up north. I think what we are trying to do, as I said, is really figure out how we use data to make our content relevant to our audiences, right? I'm a big believer that consumers will consume your products if it's relevant to them, and I think with more data and more analytics around that data and smart people making decisions, we should be able to drive consumption up and not down.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, thanks for the time, Kurt. I really appreciate it. Tegna has been a tremendous partner of my prior company, 4Info, and continue to be a great partner of Kate. And we've done some very interesting things together. Look into a future where we can continue to do some interesting things, and really do appreciate your support.
Tim, it's been our pleasure as well working with you and Cadent, and appreciate you having me on this forum. So thank you.
Thank you. Ritesh, all yours.
Amazing. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Kurt and Tim. Again, you know, every time I listen to experts in this particular area, I just feel like there's so much to learn. I mean, the world is getting complex. For someone like you, Kurt, you know, who has so many different TV stations across the country, local is in fact going to continue to gain strength. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what people need now is local community connection more than anything else. It's immediate questions, you know, like, is my grocery store safe to go? You know, I'm based in Toronto, and there's actually an app that was developed early on in the COVID world where you could actually see the number of people waiting in line before you got to the store. Very basic things, but be able to pick that up, you know, as something that we can do as an advertiser to just really help the community. So thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And before we bring in the final panel of the day, I wanted to share another quick short video clip with all of you.
In the past, reach was everything. But now, to be efficient, you need unduplicated reach. See, audiences are all over the
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us to this point in time. Again, it's been an enlightening afternoon of conversation. You know, TV as a topic, if someone was to stop you on the street, you know, seems like a very simple thing, you know, pick your content, talk about your best TV show, talk about your characters, and advertising is almost not something that's on the minds of most consumers as they do this, but it's clearly, you know, so inspiring to actually hear about the amount of thought that goes into this to make sure that the messages we're receiving as consumers are in fact messages that are most relevant to us. And so on that note, we have the final panel of the day. Again, like I said, always difficult to go last. And you guys, I really appreciate this final topic but it's very, very important. So I wanted to just quickly welcome to the virtual stage Andrew Martinson, who's a senior marketing manager at H&R Block. You know, taxes have become an interesting topic in 2020, given all of the, you know, delays that have happened, everything from, you know, timelines to potentially rule changes, you know, across the economy. And so I'm sure this will be an exciting conversation. And moderating this conversation is going to be Jess Santoro, who's the Senior Vice President of Advanced TV and Video for Cadent. And Jess, you know, again, a little birdie told me that you are a Wheel of Fortune loving family. And that, I mean, I love how you have incentivized this experience, which is that if anyone wins the you know, the puzzle of the day, that their chores can be done by somebody else. This is brilliant. Can you pass on some notes to me, because I'd love to institute this in my house.
I don't know where you get your facts, but I can't deny it. You know what? I will argue that I probably have the only 5- and 7-year-old kids in the country that know that at 7 o'clock on Channel 7, Jeopardy comes on and then Wheel of Fortune comes on.
That's amazing.
I mean, how many kids 5 and 7 know the name Vanna White?
I think it's a very, very small population. I mean, you get most 5- and 7-year-old kids are still trying to touch the TV to change channels, right? And not understanding that it's not touch screen. So congrats to you for holding that old school mentality in your home, Jess. Over to you.
Listen, man, like we're talking about TV here, and I tell my kids all the time when they say something about a commercial, I go over to the wall and I turn the lights on and off. And I say, you see those lights going on and off? Keep watching commercials, because you stop watching commercials, the lights might not work. Andy, how are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you.
Andy, it's always tough to talk to you, you know, over the last 7 months on these Zoom calls or WebExes, because I think you've mentioned before, your wife is a designer and you've got this beautiful chevron behind you, and I just have a window shade. I mean, I can't compete.
Yeah, we have some creativity in our house. Almost every room is a different color. We've got chevrons. We've got pictures and paintings everywhere. It is a minimalist disaster. Like, they would hate our house, but as a maximalist with a lot of stuff, we love it.
All right. Well, you know what? If it is late in the day, and if we get light on questions, maybe I'll just ask you to give us a tour of the house. You can give your family a quick heads up. But we are at the end of the day. So Andy, thanks for sticking around to do this with us. My name is Jesse Antoro, as Ritesh mentioned. This is Andy Martinson, and we are here for the last session after a good afternoon of some great sessions and some fantastic guests. So thank you to all of our guests from Caden, or all of our guests. Thank you from Caden. Not thanking myself there. We have maximizing reach in an era of fragmentation, and Andy is actually very well positioned to take on this topic, because unfortunately for us as citizens, we all have to at some point file taxes. But fortunately for H&R Block, we all have to at some point file taxes. So you have a lot of people that you need to reach, don't you, Andy? So I thought what I'm going to do my best here is to channel my best inner Leslie Stahl. And are you ready for some tough questions, Andy?
Absolutely.
I'm kidding. It's pretty much a softball to start. I have a whole pile of softballs here for you, actually. But to start with, it would really be great if you could just tell us a little bit about your role there, H&R Block, and some of the things that you continue to be focused on primarily.
Absolutely. So I've been with Block for 12 years, actually. I came from a myriad of different marketing backgrounds, from working with franchise and our field marketers to working on national strategy for products. And my primary focus now, and has been for the number of years, is our television strategy. So that is what I do and what I focus on at Block. And to your point, yes, we have a lot of consumers that we do need to reach in a very short time in a unique space to reach those folks. So usually.
Yeah, okay, usually you just gave me the softball, because so as we turn this to your business, you guys pretty much got a front row seat to the immediate business impact of COVID. It's certainly set up for an unprecedented and certainly interesting tax season for you guys. It would really be great if you could share a little bit of your point of view and experience around that lightning fast change in consumer behavior and how it affected the real-time decisions you had to make around your marketing and communication strategies in this changing, under the foot changing tax season.
Yeah, we all were affected, right? Every industry, every person was affected by what happened. Suddenly sports was off TV. Okay, well, what does that mean to us? Well, in our business, I actually think we're lucky in this space. Being that we are such a small window of time to make an impact on people's lives, and our business being taxes, typically just till April 15th, we're used to making some fast pivots. So our business has been being aligned for a number of years to be able to make quick pivots. And by doing that, we were able to take this impact and say, what needs to happen here? This is obviously unprecedented. Anybody with bingo card, mark that one off. But this has been a weird year, and for the first time ever, for us especially, the tax deadline actually moved out. So we had to make some pivots that we were unused to. That being said, what we had been doing for the last number of years is aligning our internal businesses so that we could be able to make those quick pivots. We had alignment between our virtual offerings, our DIY, and what was happening online, as well as our assisted space. Now, they were not by any means exactly set, and everybody knows exactly what to do in this type of situation. But having built some of that groundwork internally for a number of years, we were able to say, what do we need to do? Where do we turn it on? How do we turn it on? Given the situation we were in, obviously, we had the last push coming. It was March. Sports suddenly is off the air. People are staying home. Can they go out to offices? Our assisted business, what does that do to us? How do we pivot? Where do we move to? We were able to take the existing environment, take a look at the tone of the nation of what was happening, and align our creative team in making a new ad, along with our agency partners, along with our operational pieces to say, if we make a new ad with a new tone, can we get it on air? How quickly can we get it on air to speak to people appropriately in this time and not say, hey, come on in, it's great, but actually align to the tone, the creativity of like what needs to happen in the nation now, and still tell people it's okay to get help. We are here to help you. Here's how we can help you, and make those pivots. It was no small task. It took a lot of conversation, a lot of late night calls, like I assume most people were going through during that time frame. But just being appropriate, being within the time, and having that alignment internally, as well with our agency partners, as well as our agency partners having alignment with our media partners, being able to get things created, trafficked, and actually on air was a huge component of us being able to pivot quickly.
And sometimes you overlook how many steps are in, or how many components are to all these decisions. You just listed off creative, operations, media, the field. And speaking to that, I think in one of our conversations we've had recently, you had made the comment on the importance of personalization too. It's interesting. I'd love to get any context you can have on that, as we also saw this big shift from the brick and mortar locations that you have shutting down, and assuming that pushed a lot of people that maybe would have walked into a brick and mortar location to then have to jump online. And so how did you handle that creative personal change and personalization through that process?
Yeah, it's a good question. You're absolutely right. Again, I'm fortunate for being in a position with a company who has options that were already built. We were not in a position where we had to struggle to suddenly create a new way of people to transact with us. So that was a tailwind for us going into that, which was really beneficial. Not everybody had that. So I can't downplay the importance of that being a factor in us being able to make those pivots. But that being said, the conversations absolutely started as to what do we do? There are different KPIs between different silos, between doing something online or going into an office. There are considerations as far as people's financial health from our employees in the offices not being able to serve clients, and folks wanting to be served, and uncertainty in that space. This is where I see in my role as far as a television kind of strategist is where my alignment with my partners on the digital side. So our creative display folks, OLV, who have an ability to target a little bit differently than I have an ability to target, kind of work together. So we said, okay, where can we personalize? Do we have messages that speak to specific client segments and can reach certain client segments? Do we turn those on to a new client segment, as well as have an appropriate message overarchingly in the upper funnel on television to be able to reach clients in a different space? So can we build the bridge of here's all the ways you can still get help, but also push that with our partners on the digital side to say, hey, we're going to talk to you in a different way than we've usually talked to you, potentially assisted client. We're going to talk to you about our DIY component or virtual offerings where you can still get served by a tax pro, but in a different way.
That's helpful to know, and it's no easy task to kind of tackle. I think so. You just gave me a good opening to get into fragmentation. So I kid earlier in the opening that we all have to file taxes, but the reality is you do have a challenge of reach because you have a lot of potential customers, either your existing customers you need to get back into your fold or customers you want to rip out of somebody else. So we're arguably at the absolute peak of video viewing, but those viewers continue to be more diluted across an ever-growing number of distribution platforms to actually get that content. So as those audiences continue to spread out, how does that continue to affect the way that you are handling that channel mix planning?
Yeah, great question. I like to think we're not trying to rip anybody's clients away from them. I'll throw that one out there. This is where I'm gonna take a step back a little bit and completely own that I'm a little bit of a nerd in this space. So even before I was our TV strategist, I was a nerd in learning these things. I love kind of finding what new technology is out there for ways people interact with anything video, whether that be through video gaming, whether it be through streaming services, whether that be just going to the movie theaters or just watching traditional television, how that's changed between satellite, streaming, linear. on the air through the antenna, all of those pieces. So I will own that I'm a little bit of a dork in that space. I like it. It's just kind of my world. That being said, for years, I think all of us in the marketing space, and if you've worked with television at all, have absolutely seen that there's been a change coming. Streaming started, it's been adopted well, but I'll liken it back to kind of what we did with tax. We saw people taking action and like this new online thing happened. Okay, well, it's been adopted well, but it kind of plateaus. And it's been sitting at a plateau for a while. And I think we saw that. Linear will always have a space in it, but there's all sorts of new kind of players coming out. There are big players that you can't put an ad with. There are some that you could, but the reach wasn't quite there. So is it worth the investment? You've got other players like Addressable and DDL that have an ability to go over linear, but target an audience or target an individual user in a different way, potentially with a different message, but the measurement's not quite as fast as you want to get like in a programmatic space. So what do you do? I think with COVID and what has happened with this area is it forced the hand of a lot of people because watching has gone up. Everyone's got a TV on almost all the time now, and at least for the last couple of months before stuff started slowly opening and slowly ebbing and flowing, opening and closing, TV's on more. Now it's just a matter of where are clients watching and how are you talking to people? And I think it's a responsibility of anybody, at least from a brand representative, to be aware of all the different players in that market. So my suggestion to anybody that talks to me about this, asks me about strategy, asks me about how I go about understanding this market is simple on its face and difficult to do. It's open yourself up to learning, to understanding what are all the different places and all the fragments that are out there. But knowing that in my world and probably many of my other peers in this space and the folks I'm talking to, I'm guessing the same, you probably wear more than one hat. It'd be great if all I ever had to do was just TV and I lived in this world, but I don't. I have to do a whole bunch of other pieces for our business as well. So I can't possibly know all of it. What I can do is try to understand, at least at a base level, what they all do and where they might function for my brand if I could use them or I could tap into that. That being said, what I try to do is ensure that I'm taking meetings when I can. If I have a partner that reaches out to me with a new technology, a new capability, if I have the moment in my time, which is not often, but when I do, I'm going to take that meeting just to find out, understand what capabilities are out there. But then I absolutely have to lean on my expertise and peers. So I lean on my partners in the programmatic space. We have agencies, and I have a peer that does my job for the digital strategy. And I talk to him about what he's seeing out there and what opportunities he's got, and if they can overlap, where they cross, where they overlap, and where they might be able to do this and bolster each other. So we're not overlapping frequencies and just hitting somebody with the same thing over and over, but truly going, okay, how do we level up the entire game? I lean on my agency partners tremendously to help me understand, okay, of all these capabilities and all this knowledge I have, one, I not know, and two, what are the things that are out there that are going to help us with what we are doing? As a brand marketer, as a brand strategist, I have to lean on my partners to help me with that space, and they'll lean in. But it's also my responsibility to ask them questions and push and say, hey, how about X, Y, or Z? What about this tactic? How are people viewing? What has changed? Where do we need to be? And can we be there? Is it appropriate? The other thing in that space I think that's really important for us to understand, and that is top of my mind almost always, is where am I talking to people and how am I talking to them? Am I talking to you, Jess, am I hitting you with The Price is Right? Or Wheel of Fortune, right?
But The Price is Right's pretty good too. The only problem is I think during the day though, it's a tough one to get away. I would have some explaining to do to my boss, but I like The Price is Right.
Exactly. Well, when you're staying home alone in the middle of the afternoon doing your work on a couch, you can have it on.
It happens all the time.
But how do we know? And what partners do know? What partners know that Jess is going to watch the Wheel of Fortune at 7 o'clock every night? And can we talk to him there? And is it appropriate to? Because am I also hitting Jess 15 other times in other places and over frequenting you? At that point, it becomes annoying. So looking at the mix of kind of reach options and then keeping a lens on frequency, while also keeping a lens on, are we limiting ourselves potentially with all the new knowledge that we can get to within the television space, I think is really important.
Andy, as you sit here and kind of explain this, I can't help but, as I take down notes, I look at this and I say, okay, for you to do your job effectively, you are dealing with your peers, dealing with your media partners, dealing with your agency, trying to figure out frequency, trying to figure out messaging and personalization, trying to figure out reach across a bunch of media systems that don't necessarily communicate. How do you do this? So is there a platform or platforms or system? And when you're taking all this in, and I've always found you to be a very bright guy, but I mean, how much can you actually do in your head? What are the systems or platforms that you have to lean on to figure this stuff out?
Magic. I can't.
Yes, they say it's not the wand, though. It's the magician.
There you go. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think in our space, in the TV space, this has been one of the most interesting times. The last 5-6 years, we've had a number of folks come in to be able to measure TV differently. But to your point, not all of it talks to itself and each other. So I think for me as a marketer, I look to, okay, what is the primary KPI of my business? So there's a business KPI. There's something that we have to go for, and it goes across channels. It's not just television. It's not just programmatic. It's not just CRM, but it's a KPI for the business. I start there and then layer backwards. Okay, so what is my channel able to produce that fits that KPI? And honestly, sometimes the answer is nothing. The KPI they're measuring, I play into it, but I don't have a direct measure that can say this measure leads to X, especially in the upper funnel. As we all kind of know in this space with the television space, we're upper funnel, and there's not always a 1-to-1 ratio with this. That being said, there's a lot of new players. There's a lot of different places you can go to get measurement on television, whether you want to measure site traffic based off of an ad that's played, or you want to measure cross frequency, or you want to measure cross reach across different platforms. Are you doing something with OTT and CTV that you want to measure against what your linear partners are doing? And understanding just how those work and what they mean to your business is the crucial point. So what I do is take a look at all those potential options, pick the ones that I know are going to mean something to my business that I can tie non-directly, but as best I can to a business result. And then where does that layer into the KPI? And if it doesn't, I still need to know it and be able to speak to it and be able to speak to why it's important to business. So I think for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different as to the thing that they are measuring for their piece. And not everybody is in that space either. Some folks are very much in a linear silo channel that allows them to say, okay, I'm only being measured on linear, so I can go and measure my conversion rate. So I can go and measure my cross frequencies or my cross-platform reach. And how am I doing with incremental reach in those places? So it's just understanding what capabilities are there and which ones are going to fit to your business, which is the most important. On that note, though, I think there's absolutely, because this is newer to television, caution that you can get into. As our programmatic peers did a number of years back, you can pendulum swing that thing a little bit too far. And I think there's a real risk of saying, oh, wow, I can now look at some measurements that can really help me optimize my television's buys. I can see programs and networks and types of programming that my customers are engaging with. They engage more, they engage more often, and they engage better. That's amazing. That's something that we haven't had access to for a very long time, and this is kind of a short and new piece. But the caution there is to not rely so much on that it pigeonholes you. We are still upper funnel, and as TV becomes more of a programmatic looking thing where we can report a little bit differently, a little more granularly on customers' interactions with our brand, it's important that you don't end up going to a place where I know this block of programming, this chunk of networks and TV type shows are what's converting, so I'm going all in on those, which would be a likely scenario. But what can happen is you end up in the position where you've bought it all. So what do you do then? What do you do then when you need to scale? Suddenly, the scale options aren't as good. Or you just end up pushing a bunch of money into places that you then know for frequent. You can only be on a program so many times before you're just throwing money onto a fire. And that's not great. So at that point, you have to step back and say, where am I missing reach? Is there an opportunity in a different market, in a different place that I'm not at? Is there programming? Maybe I'm light on premium programming because it just hasn't performed for me in the past. But by not having it, I'm missing an audience completely that I'm never talking to by being over here. So it's just a caution that I've been aware of, trying to avoid, not always well, but doing our dangest to not pigeonhole ourselves into something like that and using the data to kind of honestly create a negative for our business.
I know I like how you referred to it as a caution, and we actually earlier, Dana from Sanofi had mentioned something along the same lines when she was talking with Jamie about, sometimes if you're looking too short term, you're chasing the wrong KPIs and you're maybe chasing or creating the wrong goals. So it's actually nice to hear that, there's a willingness across clients like you and Dana and others that, let's not pigeonhole ourselves. It's a new world. Let's place bets, take chances, but also be pragmatic about the data we're getting back in and how we're making decisions off of it. So speaking of, data back in and making decisions, I think one of the other things that we had talked about, and it's been a pretty common theme throughout the last 7 months and also today in our sessions, is the word flexibility. And, one of the things you had referenced, your ability to pivot, and you've aligned your businesses to be able to pivot. But we all sit here with bated breath, kind of wondering, are there some uncertainties that we haven't even seen yet? And so contingency planning. And I know this is something that has been always in your arsenal, but sometimes now it takes a little bit more importance and is accelerated a bit. So can you tell us a bit about some of the ways that you are now handling your contingency planning, from condensed timelines and just ways that, probably inevitable swift shifts of customer behavior will continue to happen?
Let me start that one by saying I'm so sorry to all of our agency partners and media partners that have been having those nonstop conversations, being pushed by the client side, my side, of, well, what do we do if? This is kind of a nonsensical year. People have been willing to make some pivots and changes in ways that they've done business for a number of years, and I appreciate that. So if you don't hear it from your clients often, thank you. Thank you for all that work.
Well, thanks, because you are at the top of the mountain, and when the agencies call us, they blame it on you. I don't know who you're going to blame it on. So just, all right.
It's fair. It's usually but it is important. This year especially, not knowing. There's a huge unknown. I spoke a lot about the benefits about being in the industry I am, that I love and I appreciate earlier. This is one of the ones that makes it challenging. I'm not on the air 12 months of the year. I don't have a quarter two. So I don't have the ability to say, okay, cool. If I don't hit it over here in Q1, it's fine. I can just pivot some dollars and we'll do some different things and we'll hit some places when it opens back up in Q2 or Q3 or even Q4. It just doesn't happen. So for that space, I think I'm probably in a hyper position of saying, okay, what if? And on that note, I think it's about building contingencies where you can. No one can predict the future. No one can say what's about to happen. I personally lean on my agency and media partners to, this year especially, identify areas where we could. So what are my options ahead of time, so that I'm at least aware and can share with my internal partners, stakeholders in the business, the C-suite, my senior leadership, about where are the pivots if something happens, and just be pre-prepared. There's no guarantees in life. We know that. There's no knowing what's going to happen if specific geo-targeting needs to happen, where it's like, okay, this one state just shut down. We don't want to shut off national television, but we need to be appropriate for areas that are specifically being hit. How do we do that? What are our options? What options do we have to talk to people through a linear space that is a little less flexible sometimes? So how do we build that into our plan? What partners can we use to build those types of contingencies in place now so that if something happens, we can pull the trigger. And who do we know? Who do we have in our back pocket? So those are some of the challenges I know I've tasked my agency partners, which is why I apologize, to go through early and have those conversations, which I think has put a lot of folks in our industry in general in a position they haven't been in a long time. It's okay, so let's expand our partner network. Let's expand the folks we're talking to. Let's expand our options for DDL or addressable or geo-targeted television. Any of those things. What can we do in a local space if we had to? What can we do at a national? What are the impacts to all those things on the brand? And what do we have to have in place early enough to be able to make those pivots? Do we have the right creative? Are we also bolstering that with our programmatic side? Is it going to make sense to our ultimate play? Not thinking in a silo of what am I just doing for my channel? So all of those things, I think, come into play as far as the challenges of contingency. Luckily, most of our partners we've talked to have been very forthcoming of, yeah, if something bad happens, here's what we will do. I think everyone kind of started thinking that when March happened, when all of a sudden there wasn't sports. It's like, oh, crud. Cool. But this year, this is going to be the test. This will be the test of what we really can do and how those pivots come to life. And are they beneficial still to us? And if they aren't, what can we do about that? So I wish I had more as to what we could do, some very specific things just for you to tell you and a magic 8 ball to well and say, this is what's going to happen, but I don't. So we're doing the best we can with what we have.
I'll take it, but I am getting lit up here. It's not just me that wants to ask you some questions, so I'm going to put my glasses on because now I got to read. Here they come. Let me see if I can get through a couple of these before Ritesh comes on and gives us the hook. Here's the first one, and I'm just going to try to randomly pick these things. In my role at my company is CRM. It was mentioned earlier that everyone has to pay taxes. So most people already have a tax filing solution. That said, how much of your marketing goes to keeping existing customers versus stealing new ones from other tax filing solutions? Ooh, I had a pile of softballs for you here, but I can't control the crowd, man. Go.
That's fair. I am not a CRM expert, and I couldn't speak directly to exactly how much goes to what pieces. But what I can say is absolutely, like any business, keeping your current client base is very important. In my space, I'm tasked with acquisition. My role for television is an acquisition play. What I'd say in general is any television marketer knows any upper funnel is also going to drive some amount of CRM. Folks are going to see you, have a brand affinity, like or not like your ads, and let you know about that on a regular basis. But there's a play in that. So I think keeping close to what your CRM team is doing is important for television because we're going to affect each other in both ways. So knowing where your email team is doing, your direct mail team is doing, your calling team is doing, however you're reaching your current base is important to also building whatever you're doing for your television planning.
All right. Well, listen, this came in before you just said you were an acquisition specialist. So the next question is, I think H&R Block's business is very quantifiable with respect to knowing who exactly is using you to file their taxes. How do you use your existing customer information and data to influence how you are targeting and spending your marketing dollars to acquire new customers? Oof.
Great question. Great question. On its surface, I would completely agree with you. What I would caution you on, what I'm always cautioning folks on when you think taxes is very, very secure. And we take our clients' data and information incredibly seriously. There are IRS and federal laws that disallow us from using a tremendous amount of that information, which is also appropriate because you'd think if you're going to do your taxes with somebody, that's your biggest financial transaction for some people for the whole year usually. And you have to trust that person is not going to go use that against you. And I say against you, meaning in any kind of targeting or to use that to hit you in a different way. It's just not appropriate. So we have a lot of data. We can't use a lot of it because federal laws, and we don't. But where we can, we are in the same business as almost every other industry where, and we have a cookieless environment coming through. We have other ways that we can do lookalike modeling based off attributes we do know from how you've interacted with our brand either in other ways And we use the same tactics that probably every other business is using in that space.
All right, I got one more for you here, and then I think we can close out the day. Last question, unless I see something else come in that's worth throwing in front of you, Andy. Do you think this past year will cause a permanent change in the way that people file their taxes in person versus online? And does that affect the way that you are now changing your marketing mix? Will you be looking at more online executions, such as connected TV, to connect with these people to keep them in that online universe?
It's a great question. I don't know. It's a little bit of inside baseball, so I hate to play this one, but I don't want to give away our edge as to what we might be doing for this year. But what I can say is across just television industry, things have changed. Things have changed how people are consuming media regardless. So regardless of the method of filing and specific to my industry, I would say it's worthwhile for anybody to take a look at the mix that they currently have. And is it appropriate right now with how consumer behavior has changed? People are consuming differently. They're consuming different places. They're at home more often, so maybe the big screen is taking up more than the cell phone used to. Maybe not, though, for some folks. So it's worth anybody's time to dig into the general change in consumer behavior and how they've been talking to their clients and where for this year.
Hey, listen, another one's coming in here, though. Let me get it, and I'm going to keep going until Ritesh tells us we have to stop. Are you viewing the Super Bowl this year and ad buys for the Super Bowl differently? You mentioned sports earlier. How do you look at big events like the SB?
Yeah, it's a great question. These are all good questions. I keep saying that as like my go-to to add time for me thinking.
Yeah, but Andy, just for the record, any of my questions that I asked you, you didn't say good question for any of them. It's just that's okay.
Well,
sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead. Super Bowl.
I'm in Kansas City, and I'm from Sacramento in the Bay Area in California. So my home team is the 49ers, and my now home is Kansas City with Chiefs. So it's tough to say whether I'm going to watch the Super Bowl this year, but it's a safe bet saying, yeah, probably. I don't know if you can see in my background, but there's a transformer behind me. I'm not a giant sports fan myself, but sports in January is a pretty big deal. I think I speak personally for myself and my brand. It's a big market. It's a lot of impressions. And you always have to look at that and say, okay, where am I balancing impressions in general with reach and then with like other measurements? Am I getting frequency that's correct? Am I hitting an audience that's going to convert for me? Am I driving some site traffic that I can track from this? What is this thing doing for me? And I would say that against any kind of large-scale, splashy type event. Sports is expensive. That is what it is. And there's always a balance between working media as far as, am I driving business results with this media and making it work for me? Or am I in a place that's going to drive a lot of eyeballs? I might get some attention, but it might, big risk, big reward, but also big potential to fail. Anything on Super Bowl invites a lot of that. So, it's always a discussion. It's never not in the lexicon, I think, of any marketer that potentially has that amount of budget to spend. So you have to consider it, but you have to weigh the good and the bad, your options and what other options you have. What I can say is whenever you look at anything like that and you're weighing those things, like, all right, you have to think in any upper funnel marketing, am I also putting eyeballs in? It kind of goes back to the idea of pigeonholing yourself with like in the optimization hole. I've optimized to where my clients are interacting with my brand well. Okay, but am I hitting enough of the wide space where I'm also not going to constantly hear, why am I not on television by everybody in the C-suite and in the field? So you have to balance those things. And that's just a reality of what we do as marketers inevitable. I can go after a market and target some audiences the best I can. But if that means I'm completely ignoring a widespread audience, it means you have to justify what you're doing on a very regular basis. So there's a balance in that space too, of making sure you're in front of enough eyeballs that folks know you're there, but hitting your target audience and your optimization audience in a way that makes sense for your business.
Well, I'll tell you, you just hit on a bunch. I've got to read a question from one of my longtime listeners. It's Rick from Weston, first time, long time, with a crucial Q1 window for H&R Block with 10 polls with huge reach like Super Bowl and March Madness play a big role in how you balance that with more precision marketing. So, you know, you just answered it, but I had to give my longtime listener, Rick, a shout out. And it is literally one last question that just came in here at 4:33 as you were talking. Speaking of sports broadcasting, how will local advertising strategies, in your opinion, change based on the digital and OTT viewing increasing? And I'll tell you what, I'll give you an out. That's going to be the last one I give you today.
Okay. It matters. It matters in what can be accomplished between the local medium, I think, honestly. So that goes, I think, to, I'm trying to think of the right way to word this. I think the option of having local, especially local sports, is hyper important as to what you can get with that and if that sport's going to be happening. People watch locally. I think of the partners that are owning those, like the networks for specific markets, and consolidation of those things. And how do you talk to folks? I think it matters. It's always been a great play to have someone in Chicago watching a White Sox game. That's going to matter. And you don't want to play the same exact media necessarily to that person that you're playing to someone in Arizona watching a Diamondbacks game. Those are the two sports teams I know in baseball. But I think that local play is going to have it's going to be changing. I don't know. You stumped me with this one, Jess. Honestly, I don't have a great answer for this.
That's all right. You know what? We got the Reaper has just come back onto the screen and he's going to shut it down anyway. I'll just say, Andy, seriously, man, it's great seeing you. It's great seeing the Chevron again. Coach Chiefs, my Patrick Mahomes is my quarterback this year, as I think I mentioned, for fantasy. Got to keep him going strong. Crappy week last week, but I feel good about this week. Ritesh, you want to bring us home? But Andy, thanks again. Really appreciate it. It is really nice seeing you, and I appreciate you sharing all your perspective today.
Thank you all for your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jess and Andy. Listen, like I said, always hard to go last. Jess, great job with the energy. Some great questions. And you know what?
Story of my life, Ritesh. Story of my life.
Yeah. It's good though. Save the best for the last, as they say.
That's what I tell myself.
Here you are, and I get to recap an amazing afternoon of conversation. So thank you all for joining us. Just, a couple of thoughts in terms of what I heard today. As we look at all of the different sessions that we had, starting right off with Jim and Kathy, and the conversation was that, the move from marketing, through content as opposed to marketing through devices, it's well underway. It's something that every marketer is going to have to know. The other big thing is adaptability becomes a huge element because things are changing so rapidly. It becomes very difficult for you to be able to define a strategy and then stick with it. And this is where a trusted partner is extremely important in helping you drive your strategy. The other big thing we heard from Kathy was sort of this reframing of the word upfront into flex front. I think it's very topical, makes a lot of sense. We've already seen it this year. Again, things changing rapidly, and so you can't just decide to do one thing and then move on. The other big thing, given that we have so many screens happening, multiple people in the same household, all watching different things potentially on different screens, how does a marketer measure what the effectiveness of their advertising is as they go across those screens? And that's another big trend we heard. Obviously, TD saying to us, he's not dying, it's just having babies. And then Dana saying, when you fail, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which of course begs the question, which baby would you throw out anyway? Because, right, there are so many different babies that are now part of the TV world. Kurt and Tim, great conversation, talking to us about the change from probabilistic measurement to deterministic measurement, and the key how local programming is so effective during something called, in a pandemic of this kind, where people are a lot more interested in the local stories. And then we had this amazing closing session talking about contingencies, the fact that we need to have different scenarios planned so that when things change, when states make decisions, when election results come out, that we have the ability to activate those plans and not have to kind of, get into that conversation about what do we do now. And so Again, thank you all for speaking, and thank you to Caden for some amazing panelists, great moderating, and some really insightful questions. And as I close, I just want to remind you that Brand Innovators will continue to provide engaging content for all of you. Our next event will be on Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And this time the topic is the future of media. And we're going to be joined by senior marketing leaders from Bose, Domino's, Hulu, and more. So thank you once again for joining us all. This broadcast will be available for viewing on demand, and we will be sure to let you know. And in the meantime, please go to our website and visit us for other content. Thank you once again for joining us and for all of your questions.